Chapter 392. 10,000-word superchapter. Brothers, can you exchange for a few monthly votes? As a member of Parliament of Jianghu State, Bai Zhanfeng, known as the governor of Yuzhou, was as simple as an old farmer, but he was very particular about his life. Bai Zhanfeng did not choose Dragon Lake Park, which Jianghu State allocated to the members of Parliament, but set up the Bai family in Mount Qing. Mount Qing was one of the famous tourist attractions in Yuzhou. Bai Zhanfeng chose the area with the best scenery in Mount Qing and built a manor covering an area of about 200 acres among the green mountains and clear water. The manor did not cover a large area, but the 2-kilometer area around the manor was all turned into a restricted area. There were armed police patrolling on weekdays, and it looked like a wealthy family that no strangers were allowed to enter. There was a pavilion on the edge of the Bai family's manor. It was a historical site, built near the water, and looked old. This place was unique. Sitting here, the most beautiful scenery of the whole Mount Qing came into view. Every inch of land in sight was a grand view. Li Tianlan sat in the pavilion and drank tea. Bai Zhanfeng, with a blank expression, and Dongqing Wudi, whose face was still gloomy, also sat in the pavilion. The three of them sat opposite each other in silence. The sky in Yuzhou became gloomy in the afternoon. The wind blew in Mount Qing, and it drizzled. The rain fell on the natural lake outside the pavilion, and on the lush green mountains. The mountains and rivers were foggy, and everything was hazy. The wind shuttled through the soft drizzle and blew the weeping willows by the lake. Li Tianlan's gaze followed the fluttering weeping willows into the distance. The hazy green mountains behind him were majestic. The hazy lake in front of him was vast. Li Tianlan looked at the extremely beautiful landscape in silence, thinking about his own worries. Dongqing Wudi did not participate in Bai Qingzhao's conferring ceremony. He and Li Tianlan followed Bai Zhanfeng to the Bai family's manor. After making a phone call, they did not talk much. Bai Zhanfeng quietly made tea and drank it, looking indifferent, but his eyes occasionally observed Dongqing Wudi and Li Tianlan. He observed their silence. The silence was a little awkward. Bai Zhanfeng smiled and winked at Dongqing Wudi. Tianlan. Dongqing Wudi spoke slowly. He looked at the misty lake. Do you blame me? His tone was steady, but it sounded a little stiff. Li Tianlan withdrew his gaze, smiled, and shook his head. No. He paused for a moment before continuing. Truth. I'm not that narrow-minded. I was definitely uncomfortable with what the marshal said at the meeting. But it's not your fault. Some things, whether you say it or not, are real. I can understand Marshal's good intentions, but it's a pity. His gaze was a little unfocused. He even had to block Wang Tianzong's killing intent, completely control the Snowdance Corps, and lead the Snowdance Corps to Tiannan. This was the best result, as good as a dream, but how could it be possible? Dongqing Wudi's breath was a little disordered. At today's high-level meeting, 5 of the 9 directors voted in favor. The 5 directors plus Gu Xingyun each represented 4 large groups. There was no doubt that the forces who voted in favor were the most likely to stir up trouble for Li Tianlan in the Snowdance Corps. The giant group did its best, but what it got was extremely limited. First of all, it transferred Wang Qianzhong to the Border Control Corps and appointed Jianghu Huaining, the general of the giant group, as the commander of the Arctic Ocean Command. It could be regarded as taking the supreme power of the Eastern European garrison for Li Tianlan in advance. Secondly, the list of the Snowdance Corps would fully respect Li Tianlan's will. But full respect did not mean full agreement. In a special warfare corps composed of real elites, the major forces would definitely put their pawns in it. This was the case in Jianghu State and even in the world. From the highest level to various institutions, provinces, cities. Where there were people, there would be Jianghu. Where there was Jianghu, there would be games. Where there was games, there would be pawns. The Snowdance Corps was undoubtedly the latest chessboard in the eyes of the major forces. Li Tianlan was not only a pawn, but also a player who controlled the entire chessboard. With such a change in identity, a slight oversight might allow the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City to seize the opportunity to beat Li Tianlan into the abyss. Wudi. Bai Zhanfeng glanced at Dongqing Wudi, who was breathing heavily, and said quietly, Your mind is in a mess. Dongqing Wudi's heart froze. He picked up the teacup and took a sip, remaining silent. Now that it has happened, we have no room for objection. No matter how distressed we are, it doesn't help. The key is to find a way to deal with it. No matter how big or small a crisis is, it is a crisis. Opportunity and danger coexist. We can't resist the danger. Can't we make preparations in advance? Bai Zhanfeng said slowly and clearly. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath, bowed to Bai Zhanfeng and whispered, "I see, Dad." Bai Zhanfeng said no more. In terms of position in Jianghu state, Dongqing Wudi's position was already above Bai Zhanfeng's. But in the manner of the Bai family, no matter how powerful Dongqing Wudi was, he was still Bai Zhanfeng's son-in-law. The key is the list. Bai Zhanfeng said. Dongqing Wudi nodded and suddenly said, "Tianlan, what's your plan?" "I don't know," Li Tianlan said quietly. His tone was just as steady, and just as stiff. He was now one of the highnesses of Jianghu state and the youngest marshal in the special warfare system. It could be said that he was in a high position. But such a change was too abrupt. In one day, what should have happened and what shouldn't have happened had happened. Power, status, honor, and responsibility pressed on him before he could react. Under such a heavy burden, he didn't even have time to breathe before he had to lead the Snowdance Corps to Eastern Europe. Li Tianlan would not flinch. But now he didn't know how to move forward. He had yet to adapt to his current height, but he was already about to charge forward with large strides. The feeling of suddenly losing direction was not one of nervousness or fear, but of confusion. Only confusion. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Zhanfeng looked at each other and didn't speak to each other. Some changes would happen sooner or later. Now no one doubted Li Tianlan's martial arts and potential, but his ability to deal with problems in a chaotic situation was still a question mark. Sometimes, this was even more important than martial arts. Without this ability, no matter how strong he was in martial arts, he was just a martial artist, not a qualified leader. The two of them were not worried about Li Tianlan's ability. Li Honghe, the former god of war, had spent many years to cultivate his successor. In any case, he could not be a pure bore. In the final analysis, Li Tianlan's biggest problem was to adapt and integrate into the high-level circle. "The list is based on my will, but I can't have the final say, can I?" Li Tianlan asked softly after a long silence. "Most of them will be based on your will. But in the army's high level, there are at least 2 positions that we can't take. This is the minimum rule." Dongqing Wudi said, "One is the vice marshal of the army, your main assistant. If there is no accident, this position will be transferred from the Beihai Corps. The Wang family of Beihai is very powerful in Eastern Europe. It's reasonable to give them the position of vice marshal. The other is the army supervisor, which must be appointed by Kunlun City. He is responsible for monitoring the Snowdance Corps and has the power to report the movements of the Corps to the decision-making committee at any time." His voice was a little low, with suppressed anger and helplessness. A vice marshal and a supervisor were the most sensitive positions. Around these 2 positions, 2 sets of teams belonging to Beihai and Kunlun were bound to emerge. These 2 sets of teams might not be able to control the overall situation, but they were enough to restrain some of Li Tianlan's actions, and even completely overthrow Li Tianlan's position as the commander-in-chief if they seized the opportunity. Eastern Europe has changed dramatically, and only the Snowdance Corps is going to Eastern Europe? What do Sword Emperor and Hidden Gods say? Li Tianlan continued to ask. Of course, outside the Snowdance Corps. Beihai province is relatively independent. Wang Tianzong went to Eastern Europe for the interests of Beihai province. Of course, if conditions permit, the Snowdance Corps can ask for his cooperation. Sai City stands aloof from the world and has always been a free force. Situ Zhongyue is also independent of the Snowdance Corps, Dongqing Wudi said. What he said was very clear. The Snowdance Corps gathered the special warfare elites of Jianghu state, but it could not limit the Invincible Realm experts. In such a chaotic situation, the Invincible Realm experts had considerable freedom. Li Tianlan nodded. In this case, how about drawing 20,000 people from the 40,000 troops of the Sky Academy into the Snowdance Corps? As for... Li Tianlan's tone suddenly paused. There was a flash of hesitation in his eyes, and he looked at Dongqing Wudi. It was not until this moment that he suddenly remembered that he had become the commander of the Snowdance Corps, which was equivalent to Wang Tianzong forcing the Dongqing clan to sit on the gambling table. But Dongqing Wudi still had his choice. He could choose to fully support himself and gamble with Wang Tianzong. But if it was safe, in the unknown time in the future, The Dongqing clan could also try to disassociate themselves from him. Maybe they would not completely disassociate themselves, and maybe they would still pay a huge bargaining chip and the price of generations. But it was much better than the result after he failed. If the Dongqing clan had the intention to retreat, Li Tianlan could understand. If he wanted the elites of the Border Control Corps in the Sky Academy at this time, it would definitely embarrass Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi clearly saw the hesitation in Li Tianlan's eyes. "No problem," he said without hesitation. "I will screen the 40,000 people as soon as possible and form the strongest framework of 20,000 people. I can give Li Zhonghu and the other 3 to you. Tianlan, as for each of the hundreds of thousands of troops in the Border Control Corps, I dare not say that they are absolutely loyal, but you can rest assured about each of these 40,000 people. If you can trust me, you can trust them." In Li Tianlan's heart, the Dongqing clan might have a choice. But in Dongqing Wudi's heart, since he had come to this point, he would never turn back. He could not give up Li Tianlan. Absolutely not. "Thank you, Marshal." Li Tianlan bowed to Dongqing Wudi. Dongqing Wudi gave a carefree smile. In the hazy drizzle, his smile was cool and a little bitter. "In addition, I will transfer some people from Sai City to the Snowdance Corps," Li Tianlan said softly. He had only been to Sai City once. But after all, he was the young governor of Sai City and had enough power to use the resources of Sai City. Power might not be equal to qualification. But now was not the time to talk about this. He could not give up the position of the commander of the Border Control Corps, so he could only increase the strength around him as much as possible. He was afraid of death, afraid of failure, afraid that he would be crushed like an ant by the general trend set off by the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, and even more afraid of the consequences that the Li family, the giant group, and even Sai City would face after his death. Li Tianlan took out a cigarette and lit it. He took a deep breath and said, "Can Jade Pool give me some support?" "I'll talk to Junior Sister Head," Dongqing Wudi said in a calm tone. "I've already asked someone to sort out the information. It's all the power of our giant group in the special warfare system. The information will be sent to you in the evening. They can all be trusted. You can choose some and let them join your Snowdance Corps." Li Tianlan nodded. He didn't have much time. The decision-making committee gave him 3 days to build the Snowdance Corps, and he had to arrive in Eastern Europe within 5 days. There was also time to contact the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. It was quite urgent. Li Tianlan took a sip of tea in silence. Just as he was about to continue, his cell phone suddenly rang. The caller ID was an extremely strange number, and it belonged to Yu Zhou. Li Tianlan frowned, picked up the phone, and said hello. "Your Highness Li Tianlan?" On the phone, an old voice sounded. It was very strange, and there was no extra emotion in the unhurried tone. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and said faintly, "It's me. Your Highness, I asked to talk to you alone. There's a very important thing. Maybe it's about the boss's life and death." The old voice continued to ring, and it was calm. "Boss?" Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. "Qin Wei Bai." Li Tianlan suddenly fell silent. After a long time he said calmly, "Who are you?" "The 13th Supermaster of Samsara Palace." The old man on the phone chuckled. "My code name is Tianji. Your Highness, we met more than 3 years ago at the garden party." More than 3 years ago. The garden party. Listening to the old voice, Li Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes wide. He suddenly felt ridiculous. The 13th Supermaster of Samsara Palace. "Tianji? I'm on Mount Green," Li Tianlan said. "The manor of the Bai family?" "The manor of the Bai family." On the phone, Tianji was silent for a while and whispered, "I'll wait for you at the top of Mount Green, Your Highness." Li Tianlan calmly hung up the phone and looked at the scenery outside the pavilion. He was silent for a long time. "I'm going to the mountain." He pointed to Mount Green outside the pavilion and looked at Dongqing Wudi and Bai Zhanfeng. The top of Mount Green was naturally the highest place on Mount Green. How powerful was Dongqing Wudi? Even if he didn't have to listen to the phone call, he could vaguely hear something. The word, samsara, made his eyes light up slightly. He nodded and said, "Go ahead. Be careful." Li Tianlan nodded, stood up, and left the pavilion. It was right to be careful. But with his current strength, he didn't have to be too cautious. And when the snow dance corps was about to set off, neither the Wang family of Beihai nor Kunlun City could plot against him at this time. Dongqing Wudi and Bai Zhanfang looked back at Li Tianlan's back at the same time. The back was thin, but it was extremely straight and sharp as a sword. There was undisguised appreciation in Bai Zhanfang's eyes. Dongqing Wudi was still silent. "Do you feel bad?" Bai Zhanfang suddenly asked. Dongqing Wudi said nothing and turned his head to drink tea in silence. The tea was getting cold, and the rain was still drizzling. The water in the teapot boiled again, and the tea leaves swirled in the boiling water. When Bai Zhanfang was about to give up the question, Dongqing Wudi raised his head again. He looked into the distance, at the hazy landscape and dense fog that Li Tianlan had just seen. "I don't feel bad." His tone was calm. "You're a great general." Bai Zhanfang stood up and picked up the extremely expensive teapot. He poured the boiling water into the pot under the pavilion. The boiling water blended with green lake, bringing a white splash and heat. "I'm old," Bai Zhanfang suddenly said. "I feel bad." Without waiting for Dongqing Wudi's answer, he walked out of the pavilion directly. "Go about your business. Come back for dinner in the evening." He walked out of the pavilion and went ashore along the antique bridge. Dongqing Wudi still sat where he was, motionless. Bai Zhanfang suddenly turned around, looked at his son-in-law's back, and asked, "Who was on the phone with Tianlan just now?" "It seems to be the supermaster of samsara," Dongqing Wudi replied. "So you should calm down." Bai Zhanfang said, "Eastern Europe is a place where it's hard for us to get involved, but do you think it's also hard for Boss Qin to get involved?" According to the intelligence, Samsara Palace was one of the first forces to enter Snow Country. The headquarters of Samsara Palace was destroyed and suffered heavy losses, but in Eastern Europe, they may have enough power. You and Wang Tianzong are sitting at the gambling table, and Samsara Palace is one of your chips. Wang Tianzong also knows Samsara Palace, but he won't know what it means, and neither do we. Unknown means all possibilities. I understand. Dongqing Wudi nodded. He turned his back to Bai Zhanfang, so no one could see his expression. "But how can I calm down?" "If you really can't calm down, you might as well ask about the chips in your hand." Bai Zhanfang turned and left. He was bathed in the drizzle, carrying the teapot. In the gloomy weather, his figure looked a little stooped. Dongqing Wudi held the teacup in one hand and picked up his mobile phone with the other. The chips that needed to be asked were naturally chips that he didn't know what they meant. Dongqing Wudi found Qin Weibai's phone number and seemed to be hesitating whether to dial. Bai Zhanfang ignored the psychological activities of his high-ranking son-in-law. His figure stepped over the small bridge by the lake and strolled on the flat path at the foot of the mountain. The guard who had been guarding here opened an umbrella. Bai Zhanfang waved his hand, bathed in the cool drizzle of midsummer, crossed the entire manor, and returned to the main villa in the manor. He didn't tell the guard anything. The guard stood in front of the door and saluted, then returned to his guard duty with the umbrella. Bai Zhanfang pushed the door open and walked into the villa alone. The lights were on in the villa. Under the soft light, two old men who shouldn't have been here were sitting in the living room playing chess. Jianghu State chess. The game of chess had entered an endgame. But the two pawns on the chessboard had crossed the river. For the pawns, such an endgame was actually the real beginning. Green Mountain was not high, but it was huge. However, the top of Green Mountain was not flat. The steep slope of the top reduced the area of the top, so it was not difficult to find people. The drizzle was like silk. The crowds of tourists who came to Green Mountain were much quieter. Li Tianlan climbed to the top of the mountain along the steep mountain road and saw an old Taoist in a Taoist robe and holding a horsetail whisk at a glance. The Taoist's beard and hair were all white. He didn't pretend to be profound and turned his back to him. Instead, he faced him with a soft smile. Even on weekdays, there were not many tourists at the top of Green Mountain. The mountain road was steep and exquisite. All tourists had better choices if they wanted to overlook it. At this time, it was drizzling, and the top of the mountain was even more deserted. Only the old Taoist and Li Tianlan were left. The metaphysics grandmaster of Jianghu State. Taoist Xianxia. Li Tianlan thought it was him, but he still felt a little ridiculous. Qin Weibai was Great Master Wu Wei's adopted daughter. Xianxia was Qin Weibai's subordinate. The two metaphysics grandmasters of Jianghu State were by Qin Weibai's side. Vaguely, There was a feeling of destiny. Li Tianlan's mind was a little confused, but his footsteps didn't stop. Taoist is looking for me? He walked up to Xianxia and asked. Your Highness, I'm Tianji. Xianxia bowed with a smile, respectful but not obsequious. Li Tianlan stared at Xianxia intently. Have you always been a member of Samsara Palace? His tone was a little curious. Xianxia, Supermaster of Samsara, Tianji. This identity change happened without warning, and Li Tianlan was still a little surprised until now. I used to belong to Kunlun City. After your Highness returned to Huiting, I joined Samsara Palace. As for now, on the surface, I belong to the Wang family of Beihai. Xianxia said with a sincere smile. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slightly. Xianxia used to belong to Kunlun City. But according to all the information he got, Xianxia belonged to the Wang family of Beihai. He had a high status on Mount Dibing, similar to a visiting minister. But such a person actually belonged to Kunlun City? If this sentence was true, how much conspiracy and viciousness did it represent? Kunlun City. Kunlun City. Li Tianlan's heart was full of ups and downs. Since he entered the secular world, he didn't think much of Kunlun City in his impression. It seemed that everyone in Jianghu State was the same. Even if there was a state-protecting war god of Jianghu State in Kunlun City. But all the light in the dark world of Jianghu State seemed to gather on the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State. No one would ignore the power of Kunlun City and the Special Warfare Group, but there was an instinctive contempt in their bones. Li Tianlan didn't notice this problem before. Until he saw Xianxia, he realized that Kunlun City, the center of the Special Warfare System of Jianghu State, still hid too many conspiracies that he couldn't see. Can I believe you? Li Tianlan looked at Xianxia and asked. Now you can. Xianxia said with a smile. You can verify it with either saint or military counselor at any time. I can verify it with Little Bai directly. Li Tianlan took out his mobile phone and looked at Xianxia with no expression. Xianxia frowned slightly. His eyebrows were very white and long. When they were frowned, there was no power, but only a kind of unfathomable sorrow. Your Highness, you don't have to doubt my identity. But I don't want the boss to know that we met today. You can distrust me, but you should trust military counselor and saint. Why? Li Tianlan looked at Xianxia quietly. She's my woman and your boss. Why can't she know? This is about the boss's life and death. Xianxuanzi's tone was calm. Li Tianlan squinted at Xianxuanzi. Qin Weibai's life and death. Xianxuanzi heard it once on the phone. But at this time, Lin Fengting was beside Qin Weibai. Who could kill her? Who dared to kill her? Who wants to kill her? Li Tianlan asked. Xianxuanzi hesitated. Your Highness, do you believe in destiny? Everything seemed to be repeating again, to the garden party more than 3 years ago, when he and Xianxuanzi met for the first time. Believe in destiny? Li Tianlan squinted. Go on. It's hard to defy destiny. Xianxuanzi said softly, Your Highness, according to your original destiny, you will die before you are 30 years old. There is no possibility of survival. But when Wu Wei was alive, the boss begged Wu Wei to break your inherent destiny and force your destiny to return to chaos. Li Tianlan didn't understand. He believed in destiny and metaphysics, but he really didn't understand it. Break my destiny? Li Tianlan repeated the words. It's broken. It can also be said to be replaced. Everyone in the world has destiny and will have a trajectory. Almost no one's destiny can't be completely followed and speculated, but almost doesn't mean absolutely none. More than 3 years ago, in Mount Qingyun in Lin, the boss replaced your destiny with her own. Xianxuanzi looked into Li Tianlan's eyes. Your destiny now can't be speculated, but the boss's destiny has been doomed. In this Eastern European chaos, she is facing the tribulation for you. If you don't take action, she will definitely die. Li Tianlan's body suddenly tightened. His eyes were completely focused, and he stared at Xianxuanzi. Facing the tribulation for me? Yes. Xianxuanzi nodded and said briefly, Instead of informing the boss, it's better for us to deal with things secretly. Li Tianlan was not flustered or confused. His mind became extremely calm in an instant. What should I do? I will link your life providences together, and say something I can understand. Li Tianlan directly interrupted Xianxia, and his eyes were extremely dangerous. I want her alive. Xianxia thought for a while, then slowly said, Your Highness, you have the dragon vein, and the dragon vein is the strongest vitality. I need 1/3 of your dragon vein. I wonder if your Highness is willing to. Yes. Li Tianlan answered without hesitation. But you have to say something more realistic. The dragon vein and vitality are illusory. How can I give it to you? If I remember correctly, you should have a Buddha bead that the boss gave you. Xianxia said. The dragon vein and vitality were illusory. But the Buddha bead was real. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and took out the Buddha bead hanging around his neck. When Qin Weibai gave him the Buddha bead, she only said that it was a mascot. Li Tianlan didn't care and just hung it around his neck. This bead is called Mortal Fate. It's something that Great Master Wu Wei left to the boss, but the boss always thought that this bead was called Death Substitute, so she gave it to you and then went to Snow Country. Xianxia took the Buddha bead and said calmly. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved, but he couldn't say anything for a while. He was moved and angry in his heart. His feelings were complicated. What should I do? His voice was low. Mortal Fate can carry vitality. As long as the Mortal Fate is not broken, the vitality will not die. Xianxia picked up the Buddha bead with the horsetail whisk in his hand. He reached into his Taoist robe with the other hand and took out a delicate silver bottle. He didn't mention the death of Monk Rui, because it was meaningless. The real death substitute bead is in the silver bottle. Xianxia gently crushed the Mortal Fate in his hand. There was no power, no sword energy, and no fluctuation in space. The Buddha bead turned into the finest powder in Xianxuanzi's hand. The powder was straight like a column in the cold wind on the mountain top, and it didn't scatter at all. All of it fell into the silver bottle. I need a drop of blood from your Highness. Xianxuanzi's voice became calmer. Li Tianlan cut his finger without hesitation. He knew the Buddha bead on him. So Li Tianlan no longer doubted Xianxuanzi's identity, because no one except Qin Weibai seemed to know that he had this Buddha bead. The red blood dripped into the silver bottle. A white mist suddenly rose from the top of Green Mountain. The white mist was misty and rose into the sky, like clouds under the sky, condensed and pure. Xianxuanzi put away the silver bottle. He seemed to relax and said softly, Thank you, Your Highness. That's it? Li Tianlan was a little surprised. That's all I can do. Xianxuanzi's answer was meaningful. What's in the silver bottle? Li Tianlan asked. Now it has become a seed. Xianxuanzi replied, I will sprinkle them in Snow Country. When the flower blooms, it will be the time when you and the boss merge into one. Li Tianlan said, Oh, and suddenly said, When the flower blooms? Xianxuanzi hesitated and said calmly, When the trial comes. Dongqing Wudi finally dialed Qin Weibai's phone. Minister? The phone was quickly connected. Qin Weibai's cold and clear voice sounded on the phone. Dongqing Wudi looked at his watch and calculated the time in Snow Country. He said apologetically, Sorry, Boss Qin, did I disturb your rest? It's okay. Qin Weibai smiled and said, I just had breakfast. Minister, what's the matter? Dongqing Wudi hesitated, feeling a little ashamed and helpless. He said in a deep voice, There's a change in Jianghu state. About the snow dance corps? Qin Weibai asked straightforwardly. Dongqing Wudi froze for a moment. All the emotions in his heart kept changing and finally turned into surprise. The high-level meeting of Jianghu state ended only a few hours later. The conferring ceremony was not over yet. The meeting documents delivered to the provincial government level should not have been fully delivered. At this time, Qin Weibai already knew the content of the high-level meeting. When on earth did she know? Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath. At this moment, he suddenly felt a little horrified. If a country couldn't even keep the content of high-level meetings confidential, then what was wrong? How did you know? Dongqing Wudi asked in a deep voice. His tone was extremely serious. It doesn't matter, Minister. Qin Weibai said calmly. What matters is the snow dance corps. The snow dance corps. Dongqing Wudi's mouth twitched. I failed to stop Wang Tianzong at the high-level meeting. He said. I know. Qin Weibai said calmly. 5 votes in favor. Minister, you've done your best. Leave the rest to me. Dongqing Wudi didn't want to investigate the source of Qin Weibai's intelligence for the time being. As she said, the snow dance corps was the most important thing at the moment. What do you want to do? Dongqing Wudi asked straightforwardly. Boss Qin, the matter of the snow dance corps will not be so simple. Wang Tianzong is not so kind to push Tianlan to a high position temporarily. What he wants most is for Tianlan to fall from a high position. Qin Weibai interrupted Dongqing Wudi. So Wang Tianzong is likely to repeat the treason case 20 years ago. There are opportunities everywhere in the chaos of Eastern Europe, and opportunities will appear at any time. When the Snow Dance Corps is established, the vice marshal and supervisor will definitely belong to the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. If these 2 positions are united, they can do a lot of things. If they frame Tianlan for treason, with some specious evidence, the Li family, which will make a comeback, will disappear completely, and the Dongqing clan and even the entire giant group will be doomed eternally. Wang Tianzong will push Tianlan up a step. Once his plan succeeds, the gains will be unimaginable. At that time, the entire southeast group may be the dominant force. With the help of a big victory, Wang Tianzong can even eliminate the internal problems of the Wang family of Beihai with lightning speed. This plan is not insidious. It can even be said to be an open conspiracy. Everything is in front of us, but we can't stop it. Minister, I understand your feelings. Dongqing Wudi didn't say a word for a long time. He always thought that Qin Weibai was very young, and maybe sometimes she couldn't see through some problems. But Qin Weibai's words almost hit the nail on the head. She completely saw through Wang Tianzong's plan. But as Qin Weibai said, this was an open conspiracy. Even if they knew what the other party was going to do, they had no way to stop it. How could they stop Wang Tianzong's plan after seeing through it? The list of the Snow Dance Corps is the key. Minister, you just need to help Tianlan build a suitable Snow Dance Corps for him. I'll take care of everything else. Qin Weibai's tone was decisive and calm. Your Samsara Palace doesn't seem to be in a good situation in Snow Country now. Dongqing Wudi said in a deep voice. It's really not good. After all, not everyone can completely control the dark world. Accidents will always happen. It's good that it can be solved. Qin Weibai said. How will you solve it? Boss Qin, I hope I know your plan since our cooperation has come to this point. You know my position very well. Dongqing Wudi said calmly and persistently. I didn't solve it. Qin Weibai was silent for a while and said lightly. In fact, I'm not in Snow Country now. I just arrived in the Holy Land an hour ago. It must be extraordinary to be named after the word, holy. There were also cities named after the word, holy, in Jianghu State. For example, Shenzhou City, the capital of Beihai Province at the foot of Mount Dibing. And Europe also had the Holy Land. It was recognized by the whole world as the Holy Land, the Holy City, the Holy State, and the state within a state. Are you going to take revenge? Dongqing Wudi's face changed dramatically. It's cooperation. Qin Weibai smiled and said, in the face of the general trend, there is nothing that can't be put down temporarily. Minister, I know your concern. You worry that the treason case will repeat, but there is a premise for all this. What premise? Dongqing Wudi's voice drifted. They can make a case of treason, but there must be no evidence. Unless they can kill Tianlan, the so-called case of treason is meaningless and will only cause harm to themselves. If Tianlan is killed, there will be a real case of treason. As long as he is alive, nothing will happen. Alive. Dongqing Wudi's smile was a little cold. The word was so easy and yet so heavy. It's not easy to live under the sword of the Sword Emperor of Jianghu State. He stressed the words, Sword Emperor of Jianghu State, one word at a time. It's not necessarily difficult. Qin Weibai said in an understated tone, at least in Snow Country. Why do you say that a half-step chosen one who is infinitely close to the chosen one is as simple as an ordinary half-step invincible realm expert? Wang Tianzong is the Sword Emperor. Boss Qin, tell me, in today's dark world, is there anyone stronger than Wang Tianzong? He dragged me to the gambling table with his cultivation of swordsmanship. If he takes action in person, who can stop him? Dongqing Wudi was so angry that he laughed. His tone was full of undisguised excitement. Qin Weibai fell silent. After a long silence, Qin Weibai said indifferently, "The one who can stop a half-step chosen one is naturally the real chosen one, the chosen one at his peak state." Chosen one? Dongqing Wudi suddenly stood up from his seat. "You mean, there is a real chosen one in Snow Country?" "No," Qin Weibai whispered, and her voice was a little disappointed. "But there is a sword in Snow Country. The sword of the chosen one with the peak sword intent." Chapter 393. The endgame was also a deadlock. Any chess game would end in a deadlock. The turbulent situation on the chessboard seemed to be clear at the end, but there were endless variables hidden in the remaining chess pieces, subtle and obscure. Therefore, whether the chess game was fierce or peaceful, whether the chess style was fierce or patient, when it reached the endgame stage, it was the situation created by the chess players. No matter how such a situation looked to outsiders, only the chess players would know what all this meant. There were not many chess pieces on the chessboard. Most of the chariots, horses, and cannons were killed. The fortune teller of the red chess pieces was disabled. The two soldiers of the black chess pieces were still guarding. The red chess pieces still had the horse cannon. At this point in the game, it could be said to be the most fierce trump card. But the pawns of the black chess pieces crossed the boundary between Chu and Han, and their every move carried a strong sense of oppression. Bai Zhanfeng sat down on the sofa and watched the game without saying a word. At this point in the endgame, the chess pieces represented no longer played a big role. The control of the game was the key to victory or defeat. The two old chess players were very patient. They thought for a long time, carefully placed the chess pieces, and maintained their composure step by step. No matter how bad the situation was, all they wanted was victory. Those chess pieces that were thrown out of the chessboard before victory, no matter how important they were not important to the victory or defeat since they had been eliminated. Bai Zhanfeng watched silently. Time passed slowly. The old men at both ends of the chessboard moved more and more slowly. There were fewer and fewer chess pieces on the chessboard, and the large blank area revealed only solemnity. Draw. Bai Zhanfeng, who had been watching the game, finally spoke. He didn't know the mind of the chess players, but he saw the result of the game clearly. For the disadvantaged side, a draw is victory. The old man holding the red chess pieces chuckled. The old man's hair and beard were all white, and even his face looked abnormally pale. His face was old, his eyes were dim, and he was dressed in plain cloth clothes, looking extremely haggard. But his voice and temperament were unusually calm. It was the steadiness and calmness that had been settled for many years. His every move was shining with the light of wisdom. A draw is a draw. I'm a soldier. For me, if I can't destroy everything, it's a failure. It's the same on the chessboard and outside the chessboard. A draw is equivalent to coexistence. If they are enemies, how can they coexist? It's best to kill them all. The old man holding the black chess pieces was dressed in a tang suit and had a ruddy face. Among the three of them, he was not the youngest, but he looked the most energetic and fierce. Even though he was over 70 years old, his words were still full of determination. You're just too murderous. When an ordinary person is at a disadvantage, the first thing they think about is how to survive. Once you're at a disadvantage, the first thing you think about is how to perish together with your opponent. This is the style of your family, good or bad. If you had calmed down during that game, I wouldn't have had much of a chance of winning. However, you were decisive in killing, willing to sacrifice your troops to kill to the end. That's why I forced you into a draw. The chess game is so harmless, but if it was outside the chessboard, how tragic would it be for the two families to fight to such an extent? The haggard old man sighed softly and looked at the opponent in front of him in silence. He smiled again and said, however, there are benefits to having a strong killing intent. If it weren't for this temperament, you wouldn't have been able to cultivate the god of massacre of Jianghu state today. However, in many matters, it was best to be more tactful. It's too unyielding. It's easy to be forced into a draw with a pawn, or even turn defeat into victory. I can't help it. Your pawn is extraordinary. The old man in the tang suit laughed and said in a knowing tone. My pawn has now crossed the river and will become your pawn. I hope he can be more radical under your influence, but it's best if he can be tactful at the critical moment. The old man said this quietly, and his face became more and more haggard. The old man in the tang suit held the chess piece and said nothing. Li Honghe. Dongqing Hongguang. A former war god of Jianghu State. A former minister of the army headquarters of Jianghu State. Without anyone noticing, the two had secretly appeared in Yuzhou and the Bai family manor before the high-level meeting began. Another game? Dongqing Hongguang raised his head and glanced at Li Honghe with burning eyes. Li Honghe said a lot. Dongqing Hongguang also listened to a lot of it. However, for him, it was still a little aggrieved to play a draw when he had the upper hand. Well, another game is the same. It's been more than 20 years. How many times have you won? Bai Zhanfeng said angrily, not giving face to his in-law at all. He added water to the teapot and changed the tea leaves. The fragrance of tea began to drift in the living room again. I've only gone down a few times. Dongqing Hongguang looked dissatisfied. One game a year. Tianlan is 22 years old this year. How many games have you played? Which one have you won? Bai Zhanfeng was not polite at all. I haven't lost either. Dongqing Hongguang seemed to be a little angry. Li Honghe smiled and waved his hand. Hongguang and I have our own strengths. I'm not as good as him in some aspects, and he is not as good as me in some aspects. That's why I chose to neutralize each other. He was telling the truth. His heart was sincere. From the year when the Li family collapsed to the present, for 22 years, Li Honghe would come here every year to play a game of chess with Dongqing Hongguang. 22 years. 22 games were draws. They were all draws. Li Honghe looked down at the chessboard, his eyes a little absent-minded. He used to be the god of war of Jianghu State. But even in his most glorious period, he had never been too aggressive. He had been mediocre all his life. In the face of anything, his first reaction was not to seek victory, but to seek peace. Such a god of war of Jianghu State had naturally been brilliant, but there were not many records that could be remembered. He was seeking peace, so there were few big victories. But Jianghu State had never been defeated in the years when he was the state-protecting god of war. At that time, Li Honghe was very stable. Jianghu State was also very stable, terrifyingly stable. So until now, Li Honghe couldn't understand why he had cultivated such an aggressive son after being mediocre all his life. Stable, mediocre, and seeking peace. That was the secret of Li Honghe's success. No one would doubt the secret of his success, at least until he failed. So even if he discovered the undercurrent between the Li family and the Wang family of Beihai, Li Honghe was still confident in his control. He still tried to play a game of chess between the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family. But no one gave him this opportunity. Li Guangtu didn't give it, nor did Summer Solstice. When he was still making arrangements, the whole situation had collapsed in an instant. The flood was overwhelming, and the situation was beyond redemption. The mediocre and the draw he sought seemed so hesitant in hindsight. It was at that time that he finally began to reflect on whether there was something wrong with his way of dealing with it. Looking at the whole world, he was definitely the person who was the best at playing chess. When he was at a disadvantage, he could force a draw, which Dongqing Hongguang couldn't do. When he had an advantage, Dongqing Hongguang could sweep everything away and play to his heart's content. Li Honghe asked himself that he couldn't do that. With an advantage if he played chess, he was afraid that it would still be a draw, or even a loss. The collapse of the Li family was the result of his seeking peace when he had an advantage. It was also because he realized his own shortcomings that the Li family had today's subtle relationship with the Dongqing clan, the Bai family, and even the Zhou family later. Li Honghe silently put away the chessboard. He looked at Bai Zhanfeng, who was making tea but seemed a little preoccupied, and said with a smile, "Was the meeting very lively?" "More than lively." Bai Zhanfeng shook his head and didn't say much. Both Dongqing Hongguang and Li Honghe could get the details of the high-level meeting as soon as possible. Dongqing Hongguang didn't need to say much. As for Li Honghe, although the Li family collapsed because of Li Guangtu, no one dared to deny Li Honghe's own achievements. Just like the last Yuzhou conference, Li Huaqing personally supported Li Honghe when he attended. Sometimes, in terms of status, Li Honghe was still a retired top giant. Therefore, for more than 20 years, the staff would sort out the contents of every high-level meeting for him to read, But Li Honghe had never expressed any opinions. Tianzong is a little anxious. Li Honghe said quietly, if he can be more patient, maybe there will be other results. He was silent for a while, and then he laughed at himself. Let him be. The snow dance core is good. It's very suitable for the current Tianlan. The simple snow dance core is really good. Bai Zhanfeng looked at Li Honghe. But what about Wang Tianzong and Gu Xingyun? Let them be. Li Honghe's tone was still calm. I'll stay in Yuzhou for a few more days and visit some old friends. Bai Zhanfeng and Li Honghe looked at each other. Li Honghe's old friends were basically big shots as long as they were still alive. And they were the retired big shots of the Southeast group. Brother, are you going to play a game with the juniors of the Wang family of Beihai in person? Dongqing Hongguang hesitated and asked. It's not my turn. Li Honghe chuckled. I'll make some preparations. But in this Eastern European chaos, the little girl surnamed Qin in Snow Country is the protagonist. Foolproof. Bai Zhanfeng's eyes narrowed and he asked. How can I be absolutely sure? Li Honghe shook his head. Most likely. Dongqing Hongguang and Bai Zhanfeng's bodies relaxed at the same time. Anyway, we sought change at the cost of the Li family. The plan has reached the end stage, and we have no way back. If you can help us get through this difficulty, the Dongqing family can't repay such a great favor. Dongqing Hongguang was silent for a long time before he spoke in a low voice. Li Honghe shook his head, looked out of the window and whispered, helping you is also helping my Li family. The Holy Land of Europe was extremely small. But to some extent, the Holy Land was one of the most terrifying countries in the world. Because there was faith here. And faith had no borders. Faith. This was a word that represented too many special meanings. It was sacred, a destination, a worship, and inviolable. At the same time, it also meant absolute madness. This was a country built in Ciccio City, the capital of Italy. It was a country within a country and a holy land in the eyes of nearly 2 billion believers in the world. It was the first time for Qin Weibai to come to the Holy Land. She was not invited, nor was she an uninvited guest. It was more like a natural cooperation between the two sides under certain conditions. There was a holy palace in the Holy Land. Living in the Holy Palace was the master of the Holy Land and the spokesperson of God in the hearts of more than 1 billion believers. The bright sun shone in front of the Holy Palace. The ancient Holy Palace seemed to be gilded in the sun, mysterious and majestic, with a sense of solemnity precipitated by history and time. Qin Weibai stood quietly in front of the Holy Palace. The sun fell on her and fell in the Holy Palace. She and the Holy Palace both shone. In this state, Qin Weibai was like a statue of a goddess standing in front of the Holy Palace. It was beautiful, flawless, and inviolable. But it was a little empty. Lin Fengting stood beside Qin Weibai and looked at the solemn palace in front of him. His eyes were a little playful. It's my first time here, Qin Weibai said softly. Her eyes were a little dazed, as if she was holding back, but there was a kind of clear sorrow that could go deep into the bone. I have no wine. Lin Fengting joked. Do you have a story? No. Qin Weibai shook her head with a smile and said in a quiet tone, I just remember that a long time ago, there was a man who promised his woman that he would let the owner of this holy palace personally preside over their wedding in the church opposite. Lin Fengting's eyes were quiet and gentle. That can be regarded as the highest standard of grand wedding in any era. I thought so when I was young, but I didn't do it. He didn't do it, did he? Lin Fengting smiled softly. He did, Qin Weibai said. Qin Weibai said, her eyes a little cold. But that woman gave up herself. Lin Fengting froze for a moment. Qin Weibai didn't say much. She took a deep breath and raised her hand to tidy the hair in front of her forehead. Her movements were slow, but her whole temperament was constantly changing as she raised her hand. The emptiness gradually disappeared. The sadness disappeared. The trance faded. The wind blew in the sunshine in front of the holy palace. The wind blew her long hair and made it fly. It seemed to be in the blink of an eye. Qin Weibai's temperament became extremely cold and sacred. That was a kind of lofty arrogance. Or arrogance. Arrogance was a sin. In front of this holy palace, which should be the most humble, Qin Weibai only had arrogance. She walked slowly into the holy palace. The clear sound of high-heeled shoes tapped on the ground of the holy palace. It was very arrogant and enchanting. A holy palace guard with a mask came over. He seemed to know why Qin Weibai and others came. He saluted and then led the way in front of them silently. In the study of the holy palace, which precipitated infinite knowledge and wisdom, an old man in a moon-white robe stood quietly in front of the door. He looked at Qin Weibai and Lin Fengting, who were led by the guard, with a subtle and gentle smile. The old man's appearance was not handsome, but his face was extremely warm. He was not tall, dressed in a white robe, had silver hair, and was neat and clean. A black cross hung in front of his chest. Contrasting with his white robe, it was a striking sight to behold. He held a heavy book in his hand and stood in front of the door, but it seemed to be standing on the horizon. It was an indescribable sense of distance. He was also an indescribable old man. Qin Weibai walked up to the old man and looked up into his eyes. Real arrogance was never exaggerated, but a kind of silence and indifference in the face of the sacred, the supreme, and the glory. The old man was still smiling. His eyes were as deep as the sea, wise and deep. Elegant, kind, gentle, and wise. Like a god. Please come in. The old man waved his hand to signal the guard to leave and looked at Qin Weibai with a smile. Qin Weibai walked forward in silence and walked into the study, which was equal to glory and wisdom. The study was simple and plain, like the holy palace, only ancient and dignified. You amaze me. I'm amazed by your beauty, your intelligence, and your decisiveness. But you also make me angry because of your arrogance. The old man still held the book and stood in front of Qin Weibai, speaking softly. His voice was gentle and quiet, but it was extremely powerful. It was not force, but a kind of indescribable heaviness and oppression, as if his words could determine everyone's fate. I don't like it here, Qin Weibai said. Her Latin was smooth and cold. She sat down in front of the old man with an indifferent expression. The old man in the white robe was not angry, but asked softly, You have no faith? Yes. Qin Weibai nodded. I only believe in my man. The old man looked at Qin Weibai quietly and was silent for a long time. Qin Weibai looked at the old man, and her eyes were extremely aggressive. She sat. He stood. So Qin Weibai had to look up to him. But at this moment, she was like a queen who ruled the world, awe-inspiring and noble. Still arrogant. The old man said calmly. Qin Weibai did not speak, but quietly reached out her hand. She came here to see what she wanted to see. If the old man gave it to her, this cooperation would be a pleasant one. The old man did not hesitate. He just handed the heavy book in his hand to Qin Weibai and whispered, The Lord is merciful. You should thank the Lord. Qin Weibai did not speak and took the book from the old man's hand. The book was extremely thick, and the cover was strange black. This was a famous book in the dark world. For hundreds of years, the content had been changing, but the cover had never changed. This was the famous heretic list in the Holy Palace. It recorded everyone who was most likely to cause great chaos in each era. To put it bluntly, it was every master. Qin Weibai opened the book and calmly said, I'm here because of the chaos in Eastern Europe. The Lord gave you the list because of the chaos in Eastern Europe. The old man smiled and remained calm, but his eyes were shining with wisdom. Qin Weibai raised her head and glanced at him. She turned over the names on the first page of the list. His list was on the second page. There was a letter in the first place on the second page, and there were Chinese characters. Zhongzhou Sword Emperor. Wang Tianzong. Under this name, there was all the information about Wang Tianzong that could be collected by the outside world. Qin Weibai looked down at the information. The old man looked down at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai reached out her hand. Her fingers were slender and delicate. She was as beautiful as jade and seemed to shine with jade light. Her fingers gently lifted, but she did not turn the page. Instead, she calmly but quickly tore the whole page off. The page fluttered in the air and fell into the old man's hand. Guilty, Qin Weibai said. Her cold voice sounded in the study, but it seemed to shake the whole dark world. The old man caught the page and smiled calmly. You should be judged. Qin Weibai continued to turn the page. One of the pages had been torn out. There was also a name on the page, but there was little information. Li Shi, the young madam of the Li family, the wife of the governor of Kunlun City. Guilty. Qin Weibai said. The old man caught the page again and said with a smile, "You should be judged." The page continued to turn. Irene King Tong Wang Rothschild, Grand Duke. The page was torn off. Guilty. You should be judged. The patriarch of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Qiansong. Guilty. You should be judged. The page continued to turn. The page in the old man's hand was getting thicker and thicker. Every page should be judged. Once again, Qin Weibai tore off another page. The head of Knights Templars, Chaos. Guilty. The old man caught the page, glanced at it calmly and said with a smile, "The Lord will take back the glory given to him. He should be judged." Qin Weibai raised her head and looked at the old man. "Where are the Lord's swords and knights?" she asked straightforwardly. The trial was not a sermon. It was redemption and purification. But in the end, the trial was a trial. It needed swords. It needed knights and strength. The old man looked at Qin Weibai's eyes and said calmly, "I will crown our sis." Qin Weibai looked at the old man. After a long time, she nodded. She, who had been arrogant, bowed slightly, and her noble head seemed to be lower. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Your Majesty. There were two majesties who were known all over the world. His Majesty Sword Emperor of Beihai Province in Jianghu State. And the other one. It was His Majesty the Pope in the Holy Land. The Holy Land was the headquarters of the Vatican. The old man picked up a scepter, put it on the top of Qin Weibai's head, and said with a smile, "The Lord appreciates the humble." Qin Weibai lowered her head. Her eyes were cold as she looked at the ground. She was never humble. She would only temporarily lower her head when she needed to do so. She needed the power of the Vatican, just as he needed the Lin clan, the Dark Knights, and all the power. Her goal had never been simply to stare at Wang Tianzong. What she stared at was the whole dark world. In the chaos of Eastern Europe, she would also judge the whole dark world. The world was guilty. They should all be judged. The Pope put away the scepter. Qin Weibai stood up and left the study in silence. The old man stared down at the page in his hand, his eyes deep. A tall guard walked into the study. "I can't accept her arrogance." The guard's eyes were angry. "Blasphemy. She put herself in a higher position than you, which is blasphemy. I refuse to cooperate with the heresy. I promised her that I would crown you." The Pope looked at the page in his hand and pointed to the door with the scepter. "Get out." The guard's face changed. He suppressed his anger and walked out of the study. He could refuse the Pope occasionally. But he could not refuse the scepter in the Pope's hand. That represented a higher power than the Pope. The Pope carefully put down the page in his hand and picked up the heretic roster. The roster was thick. So Qin Weibai did not turn to the end. The Pope turned to the second-last page of the roster in silence. The information on that page was equally simple. Qin Weibai, the will of the Samsara Palace. The Pope narrowed his eyes, reached out, and gently tore the page off. He put it in the stack of pages that needed to be judged. His eyes relaxed slightly, and he chuckled. Guilty, they should be judged. Chapter 394. It rained in Yuzhou. It also rained in Shenzhou. The falling rain continued to spread over Xiangzhou city, sprinkling all over the city and covering Mount Dibing. The emperor weapon cleaned up the dust in the mountain. The holy mountain in the rain was extremely green and bright. Wang Yuetong stood in front of the window and looked out. Her palace was very high. Standing in front of the window, she could see the vast palaces on Mount Dibing. Flowers, green trees, and grass dotted the palaces. From her point of view, most of the flowers and trees on Mount Dibing were swaying in the wind and rain. The palace, which was as stable as a rock, was located here. Everything was extremely clear and layered. Wang Yuetong looked at the falling rain from the sky. It turned out that when a person stood on a high place, even the falling rain had a different style. Wang Yuetong looked at it for a long time. She suddenly felt that everything was so strange. Strange Mount Dibing, strange herself. This feeling was not joy or disgust, but pure strangeness, as if there was no place to live. The rain was falling quietly. Several statue-like figures stood in the rain under the palace, motionless. This was the 5th day of Wang Yuetong's house arrest. Her mobile phone was confiscated, the internet was cut off, and she lost all contact with the outside world. There was a small group of Heaven Punishment Troop guarding around the palace. In fact, Wang Yuetong had no chance to leave when any one of the Heaven Punishment Troop, whose average strength was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, stood downstairs, not to mention a small group. Wang Tianzong put a small group here, which was enough to show his resolute attitude. August 1st. It was the second day of the final maneuver. Wang Yuetong stared at the statue-like figures downstairs. In an environment where she could not maintain any contact with the outside world, Wang Yuetong did not even know the result of the maneuver. She only knew what her father said when he imprisoned her at that time. When the final maneuver was over, if Li Tianlan did not die, he would let her go. It was already afternoon. It was close to evening again. Wang Yuetong did not move. The watery and bright brilliance in her eyes gradually dimmed as time went by. Eventually, it became cold and desperate. A slender figure holding an umbrella passed through the rain curtain and finally came to Wang Yuetong's palace. His face was pale, and his whole body showed a kind of exhaustion and weakness that could not be concealed. But in a seriously injured state, he could still stand. Wang Yuetong's dim eyes were complicated. There was joy, and there was sorrow. It was extremely contradictory, but in the end, it all turned into emptiness and coldness. The chill of midsummer seemed to have engulfed the entire world. Her body trembled slightly. Wang Xianxia was standing downstairs. Her brother was badly injured. Was her man still alive? Wang Yuetong did not dare to think about it. Her heart seemed to be completely empty, leaving only numbness and silence. The siblings looked at each other through the curtain of rain. The continuous rain beat on the vermilion window lattices of the palace. Wang Yuetong stood in front of the window, her figure extremely clear. Her aura kept surging around her body, and the coldness in front of the palace kept increasing. The rain that fell on the ground gradually froze, and frost slowly appeared in the grass and flowers. Wang Yuetong was still in the ice-condensing realm. Her martial arts kept fluctuating. She stood there silently, unconscious and lifeless. Wang Xianxiao suddenly thought of a lyric. The rain gently bounced. The vermilion window. Who was it in the attic? Cold despair. The corners of his mouth curled up into a self-deprecating smile. The Heaven Punishment Troop under the palace saw Wang Xianxiao for the first time, and everyone bowed at the same time. Wang Xianxiao waved his hand and said softly, "Your task is done. Go back, I'll talk to Yuetong." A small group of Heaven Punishment Troop left with different expressions. Wang Xianxiao slowly walked into the palace and went upstairs. In the small hall on the second floor, Wang Yuetong's figure was still with her back to him, motionless. Wang Xianxiao lifted the delicate food box in his hand and said softly, "I brought you your favorite soup dumplings. Won't you try them?" Wang Yuetong did not speak or move. Father is back. The Heaven Punishment Troop has completed its task. From today on, you are free. Wang Xianxiao continued. Wang Yuetong looked back, and there was only a blank look in her eyes. Wang Xianxiao put the food box on the table with a bitter smile. He was silent for a long time before he continued. I lost. Gu Hanshan, Jiang Shangyu, and Song Ci. Jiang Shangyu, plus Song Ci, the four of us, together with hundreds of elites, lost without any face. Li Tianlan broke our strongest blow with only one sword move. Wang Xianxiao quietly talked about his failure. His eyes were also dim, but there was a glimmer of extreme persistence in them. Wang Yuetong's eyes also lit up. How are your injuries? She was silent for a while, then looked at Wang Xianxiao and asked softly. Not bad. Wang Xianxiao said calmly. It's just that my realm regressed a little bit. It's just a matter of time. If I have time, I can always catch up again. Before the maneuver began, he was really at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, but he was seriously injured because he forced himself to practice the half-samsara of the Wang family of Beihai. At the beginning of the maneuver, his realm was already unstable. Li Tianlan's strength made him completely determined. The strike of lowering his realm was not from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm, but directly to the peak of the fire-flaming realm. He paid such a huge price, but he still lost to Li Tianlan. This maneuver was really tragic for Wang Xianxiao. Where is Tianlan? Wang Yuetong's voice was low. Wang Xianxiao looked over. Wang Yuetong turned her head. She also knew that it was not appropriate to ask Wang Xianxia this question. But she, who had lost all contact with the outside world, really wanted to know how Li Tianlan was. Li Tianlan is fine. At most, he is slightly injured. Wang Xianxia said calmly. After the maneuver, he rose to the top. At the high-level meeting that just ended, the high level decided to restart the snow dance corps of Jianghu State. Li Tianlan is the second marshal of the special warfare system after Gu Qianchuan. Brother Jiang took over the part-time job of Minister Dongqing and became the commander of the Border Control Corps. The light in Wang Yuetong's eyes gradually lit up. He is still alive, Wang Yuetong said. She didn't care about Li Tianlan's current status. The commander of the Snow Dance Corps and the marshal of special warfare were just a very vague concept in her mind. It might not be low, but she didn't think it was high either. Since she was a child, the elders who appeared around her were all in high positions. It was just a position, so it was really hard to shock Wang Yuetong. What she cared about was that Li Tianlan won the maneuver and that her father didn't attack him. He was still alive. Alive. Wang Xianxiao nodded. So, can I leave now? Wang Yuetong asked. Yes. Wang Xianxiao sighed softly. He hesitated for a moment and took out 2 bank cards from his pocket. My father asked me to give you the black card. The gold card is mine. If you insist on leaving, take the card with you. Li Tianlan is destined to be the enemy of the Wang family of Beihai in the future. You are born in the Wang family of Beihai, so your life may not be easy. If you can be independent financially, you won't have to suffer too much in the future. Wang Yuetong looked at the 2 cards on the table. The gold card was the brother's doting on his sister, and the black card was undoubtedly the father's explanation to his daughter. Wang Yuetong suddenly laughed softly. She took out another card from her pocket and put it on the table. Wang Xianxiao frowned. He is my man. He should support me. Wang Yuetong said calmly, I will take the money of the Wang family of Beihai down the mountain and give it to Tianlan. If he doesn't feel comfortable accepting it, you won't feel comfortable either. In this case, it's better not to take it. The Wang family of Beihai and the East Emperor Palace should have a clear boundary in the future. It's better not to have so many entanglements. A clear boundary? Wang Xianxiao suddenly raised his eyebrows. Yuetong, you can't wait to draw a clear boundary with your family? This is not drawing a clear boundary. Wang Yuetong said softly, this is just my choice. Brother, our family is too big. I didn't think much before, but recently I suddenly found that in this family, everyone has a role, but I can't find my own position. I shouldn't continue to be willful. I won't come back until I have a position on this mountain. What position do you want? Wang Xianxiao said coldly. The hostess of the East Emperor Palace, the daughter of the Wang family of Beihai, and a friend of the Wang family of Beihai. Wang Yuetong looked at Wang Xianxiao and said softly and firmly, this is the most suitable position for me. Wang Xianxiao looked up at his sister. How is it possible? After a long time he asked back. Nothing is impossible. Wang Yuetong smiled faintly. Brother, what's your plan? Wang Xianxiao was a little stunned. 1 second ago, he was worried about his sister's future, and the next second, she was already worried about his future. Plan, he hesitated, shook his head and said calmly, I won't leave Beihai for the time being. I will recuperate here. After I recover, I will practice martial arts in seclusion. Wang Yuetong was silent. After a long time she said softly, then I'm leaving. Walk around with me. Wang Xianxiao sighed softly. He walked to the window and looked out. His eyes were full of affection. Let's look at Mount Dibing. For a long time in his life, he was destined to have only martial arts. For a long time in her life, she was destined to have only that man. He would be silent. She would travel far. She would leave. As a member of the Wang family of Beihai, how could she not take a look at the magnificent mountains and rivers between the sky and the sea before leaving? Wang Tianzong didn't see his daughter again. Since he couldn't keep her, it didn't make sense to see her. He walked quietly on the path of Mount Dibing, aimlessly, as if he was meditating. After the conferring ceremony in Yuzhou, Jianghu was already in a military uniform. The martial rank was shining, majestic. He followed Wang Tianzong quietly, wanting to say something but stopping on second thought. "What do you want to say?" Wang Tianzong suddenly asked. "I'm a little confused. I hope Master can give me some advice. How should we deal with the Border Control Corps?" Di Jiang chuckled and said calmly, "The Black Dragon Battalion won't be a big problem. Qianzhong should be able to open up the situation quickly. Dongqing Wudi will soon hand over the Thunderbolt Battalion. This is a troop directly under your command. Fill it with people from the Beihai Corps. The Wild Sand Battalion and the Pegasus Battalion can be put aside first. At present, the most important thing is the Blood Battalion. They are close to Tiannan and their position is very sensitive. If we can control the Blood Battalion, it will be very beneficial for us to open up the situation in Tiannan. Tiannan is indeed very important. The Dongqing clan has also realized this. Some time ago, Wang Wantian was transferred to the Eastern Theater of Operations, and Dongqing Wudi put Thunder God in the Blood Battalion. They are obviously unwilling to give up the right to speak in the Blood Battalion. Di Jiang said subconsciously. Wang Tianzong's body suddenly stood still. "What did you say?" he asked suddenly. Di Jiang was a little confused. "I said the Dongqing clan will not easily give up the Blood Battalion." That was not what Wang Tianzong wanted to hear. But all the veins in his mind suddenly became extremely clear. The Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan, the Li family, Ning Ziyuan, the Tiannan Freedom Corps, the Purgatory of Heaven capital. Everything that had been in front of him had now become a line in front of him without warning. Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes tightly, and a flash of sharpness suddenly flashed in his eyes. He finally knew what he had ignored. After figuring out the situation in Tiannan, everything was clear. But the result of the joint operation of all the major forces had shrouded everything there in a layer of fog. The most important thing was that Wang Tianzong had underestimated how much the Dongqing clan cared about Li Tianlan. When the Dongqing clan was willing to stand in front of Li Tianlan to shelter him from the wind and rain, he should have realized what Tiannan meant to Li Tianlan. During this time, his eyes were all focused on the Border Control Corps, the chaos in Eastern Europe, and the Li family. Intentionally or unintentionally, he ignored the situation in Tiannan formed by the operation of multiple forces. The Blood Battalion. The Freedom Corps. The Purgatory of Heaven capital. Even the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters dominated by Mount Shu. Now it seemed to have no connection. But if Li Tianlan was added to all this, it vaguely formed a whole. The Blood Battalion was operated by the Giant Group. The Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters was the work of the Prince Group. And the Freedom Corps, Ning Ziyuan's transfer was an internal transfer of the Wang family of Beihai. Such an obvious situation was in front of them, but Wang Tianzong had never paid attention to it. How ridiculous was that? Li Tianlan now won the first place in the maneuver. If the East Emperor Palace entered Tiannan as a free force, the chain reaction would be earth-shaking. Tiannan seemed to have no connection, but it was an extremely delicate situation. Li Tianlan was one step away. What the Dongqing clan did not want to give up was not the Blood Battalion. They obviously did not want to give up Tiannan. Wang Tianzong was silent for a long time. Let Chen Qingwan enter the Snow Dance Corps as the vice-marshal. Wang Tianzong suddenly said. Chen Qingwan? Di Jiang frowned. Chen Qingwan was one of the few female experts in the Wang family of Beihai, and one of the vice-marshals of the Beihai Corps. But the most important thing was that Chen Qingwan had always been Wang Qinglei's direct subordinate in the faction of the Wang family of Beihai. Why her? Di Jiang asked. Wang Tianzong remembered the situation when Wang Qinglei recommended Ning Ziyuan to be the commander of the Tiannan Freedom Corps. It was indeed the best choice to send Ning Ziyuan to Tiannan and kick him out of the core of the Southeast Group. Even now, it seemed that there was no problem. But the problem was obvious. Wang Tianzong was not sure whether Wang Qinglei had other purposes at the beginning. Send an assistant to Chen Qingwan. Wang Tianzong said, You appoint the assistant. Di Jiang nodded, but he was still a little confused. Why her? Why can't it be her? Wang Tianzong asked in a calm tone. Di Jiang hesitated and seemed to be thinking about something. Wang Tianzong reached out his hand. A glittering and translucent light gradually appeared on his palm. The light flowed and extended in his cuff silently. The soft light accurately covered his palm and finally turned into a glove. It was a glove with crystal clear and almost transparent color. Wang Tianzong took off the glove and handed it to Di Jiang. Just in case, you go to the blood battalion to inspect during this time. Li Tianlan could not go to Tiannan now. Everything in Tiannan had not been completely finalized. If there was a chance, it might be possible to break the current situation. Di Jiang took the glove and was in a daze. He knew very well what this glove was. It was borrowed by Wang Tianzong from the Shadow Throne in Europe. He arrived at Mount Dibbing in the middle of the night last night. And Wang Tianzong's original intention was not to give it to him, but to borrow it for Tyrant. Tyrant? Di Jiang hesitated. I can't find Tyrant now. Wang Tianzong said, before that, you take it with you to suppress Tiannan. Di Jiang held the glove and suddenly felt that the thin glove was as heavy as a mountain. Who could think that this small and exquisite glove was one of the 12 murderous weapons in the Dark World, second only to the human emperor? The murderous weapon Tiannan. Among the 12 murderous weapons, everyone had a different ranking in their mind. But the top 3 of the 12 murderous weapons were recognized as the most powerful and deterrent. The human emperor ranked first. The third was Blue Sky Underworld. Between the two was the glove in Di Jiang's hand. It belonged to the Shadow Throne, the murderous weapon with the fastest speed and the strongest single penetration among the 12 murderous weapons. Indefinite Shocking Rainbow. Chapter 395. Although the Holy Land was small, it was a world-famous sleepless city. Whether it was wind, frost, rain or snow, it was a pure land without darkness. When the sun faded, soft lights would replace the night immediately. The white light shone in every corner of the Holy Land. The churches and the Holy Palace in the Holy Land were more brilliant in the light. The Pope was still sitting in the study of the Holy Palace, quietly reading the heretic roster in his hand. The roster had been much thinner, but the content was still rich and colorful. The names and information recorded in the roster were not all martial arts masters of the Dark World. There were also some wealthy patriarchs and core members in their respective fields, politicians, terrorists, important figures of other religions, and even ordinary people. In the eyes of the Vatican, the size of a heretic was never distinguished by force. From the standpoint of faith, as small as a public statement, as large as a certain practice that was promoted to a certain range, it could become a heretic. Heretics must be on the heretic roster. The heretics on the roster must be purified. The Pope quietly read the roster. The light in the room fell on him. His figure was mysterious and majestic. The heretic roster had been turned to the last page. On the cover of the last page was a row of ancient quotes written in Latin. It seemed to be stating the cruelest fact. Those who betray the glory of the Lord are all heretics. The Pope stared at this sentence deeply. His eyes were pure and pious. Someone passed through the road of the Holy Palace and approached the study in the deepest part of the Holy Palace. His footsteps were silent. The door of the study was open. The lights inside and outside the study crisscrossed in front of the door. A figure stood silently at the door, looking at the Pope in the study. The light in the study seemed to be eternal. The ancient statue of God carrying a cross stood silently. The old man sat in front of the stone statue, looking down at the book in his hand, motionless. The picture in his sight was extremely real, with almost frozen solemnity and silence. The figure at the door was a little hesitant, as if she didn't know whether to go in or not. This was a mysterious woman who could bring endless reverie to anyone. She was mysterious and sacred. She was undoubtedly extremely beautiful, but this kind of beauty was not breathtaking. Instead, it was a kind of infatuation that made people want to get close to her. Her figure was tall and slender, and a loose white robe covered her figure. Her face that was enough to topple cities was covered by a hazy veil. In the crisscrossing light and shadow, only a pair of deep blue eyes and long golden hair could be seen from her entire body. However, she had a kind of intoxicating charm. This kind of charm was so mysterious and holy. This was pure beauty. One didn't need to see her face. Just a pair of eyes was enough to cause people to sink in and be unable to extricate themselves. She stood in front of the door, like the bright moon in the sky covered by the lights, bright and gentle. The Pope remained seated, his head lowered as he stared at the roster in his hands. He didn't move at all, but the sound of pages turning suddenly rang out in the study. There was only the Pope in the empty study room. But at this moment, it was as if there were countless people flipping the pages of a book. Some were fast, some were slow, Some were light, and some were heavy. The sound of paper flipping was soft and messy, making people dizzy. "You found me," the woman covered in a white robe and veil from head to toe said softly. Her voice was elegant and melodious, with a very intimate and friendly quality. "You didn't find me." The light in the study room seemed to shake quietly. The study room was still the study room. The Pope was still sitting there. But another Pope suddenly appeared in front of the bookshelf in the study room. He lowered his head and gently flipped through a thick Bible in his hand. "Angel, your heart is in a mess. Can you tell me why?" The Pope lowered his head and flipped through the Bible, speaking softly. "Angel. In the Holy Land of Europe, there was only one angel. She had no surname. In the hearts of more than 1 billion believers of the Vatican, she was bathed in the glory of God and was the child of God. The current Holy Virgin of the Vatican. Saint Angel. In the Vatican, her status could be said to be second only to the Pope, and even higher than the major cardinals." "No." Holy Virgin Angel shook her head, and her tone was a little sad. "I just thought of the chaos in Eastern Europe, so many innocent people. I am praying for the people of Eastern Europe." The light was slightly distorted. The Pope in the chair was still staring down. The Pope in front of the bookshelf was still flipping through the book. In front of the statue, another Pope suddenly appeared. He knelt in front of the statue and made the sign of the cross. His tone was distant and deep. "Where heretics and heathens gather, there will always be darkness and blood. God said that I allowed darkness to exist. But darkness can never be above light." The Pope stood up. He looked at Holy Virgin Angel and said meaningfully, "Who will cherish light without experiencing darkness?" The Holy Virgin was silent. After a long time, she walked into the study room and whispered, "I will remember your teachings." In the study room, the 3 popes in different postures still maintained their movements, staring, reading, and contemplating. They were lifelike, and it was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. "What is heresy?" The Pope pondered for a long time before suddenly asking softly. Angel was stunned and replied almost instinctively, "Those who betray the glory of the Lord are all heresy." Some people shout the name of the Lord, but choose a different direction from the Lord. They will go to hell, and their end will inevitably be according to their actions. The Pope's voice was still gentle and kind, but his figure was extremely cold in front of the statue. "They should all be judged." Angel bowed slightly and said calmly, "They should all be judged. Go to Eastern Europe." The Pope said, "Angel, bring your holy punishment priest. Cooperate with the saint warriors of Ars to purify the darkness there and sprinkle the glory of the Lord in all corners of Eastern Europe. Heresy needs to be judged, and those who are false believers who have distorted the glory of the Lord should also be judged." "This is my duty," Angel said softly. The internal structure of the Vatican was simple and clear. The group of bishops, which often appeared in front of the world, was headed by red-robed archbishops. Chief bishops, diocesan bishops, archbishops, bishops, and priests were all members of the group of bishops. They were responsible for the daily operation of the Vatican, stabilizing the faith of believers, listening to the prayers of believers, and dispelling doubts. Next was the Holy Disarmament Corps, the armed forces of the Vatican. It was headed by Saint War Angel Ars, who ranked third on the world's divine list. Its main responsibility was to maintain the dignity and glory of the Vatican and to judge heresy. Its main responsibility was to fight. This was an elite force selected from more than 1 billion believers in the world. They were also fanatics in the Vatican. Most of them would not be stationed in the Holy Land, but scattered all over the world. Where there was a cross, there was the Holy Disarmament Corps. Then there was the most mysterious Holy Punishment Priest Group and the Arbitration Council. The Holy Punishment Priest Group was directly led by the Holy Maiden. It was responsible for spreading the glory of the Vatican, guiding faith, punishment, and redemption. The Arbitration Council was an intelligence and assassination agency. In the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital more than 3 years ago, after the killing angel Aldac of the Vatican died in the hands of Li Tianlan, the Arbitration Council had been managed by the Holy Maiden. The Pope controlled everything in the Vatican. To put it simply, the Holy Disarmament Corps was responsible for fighting, and the Holy Punishment Priest Group was responsible for brainwashing. It was the duty of Holy Maiden Angel to spread the glory of the Lord in any corner of Eastern Europe, and it was the most important duty. "Don't let me down, Angel," the Pope said softly, The Eastern European parishes are very important. I'm tired of the debate that has lasted for years. Those heathens don't understand the glory of the Lord at all. They have desecrated the cross. They should go to hell with the heathens of Eastern Europe. Yes, Your Majesty. Angel's voice was soft and pleasant, but she thought of Eastern Europe in her mind. The religion of Eastern Europe was not complicated. Even in the eyes of many people who were not religious, the religion of Eastern Europe was just a branch of the Vatican. Many people who had no faith called the Vatican in the Holy Land the Catholic Church, and the religion of Eastern Europe the Eastern Church. The ruler of the Catholic Church was the Pope, the only spokesman of God in the world, and the largest religion in the world today. The ruler of the Eastern Church was the Patriarch. From the perspective of religious belief, the most important or even the only difference between Eastern Europe and Western Europe was that Eastern Europeans believed in the Eastern Church, while Western Europeans believed in the Catholic Church. This statement might not be absolute, but most of it was extremely correct. Eastern Europe was now in turmoil. More than a dozen countries were in chaos, each with its own ulterior motives. The major forces in the dark world were ready to take action. Under the gathering of the wind and clouds, the Eastern Church was bound to be in it. In that chaos, if the Eastern Church was destroyed, the Catholic Church would sweep Eastern Europe in the fastest time. Once the Eastern European diocese was established, the power of the Vatican would expand again, and they could even try to re-establish the great East Asia diocese they had planned to establish in East Island more than 3 years ago. The establishment of each diocese represented the expansion of the glory of the Lord, as well as infinite interests and power. Eastern Europe was chaotic. But the Vatican liked the current Eastern Europe very much. So they would be more chaotic next. There were countless unstable factors, competition for interests, entanglement of grievances, conflict of beliefs, political differences. There would be wars there, the most complicated wars. Angel didn't know how long the Pope had been watching Eastern Europe, but she was sure that the Samsara Palace was not the only superpower that chose to cooperate with the Vatican this time. Therefore, the chaos in Eastern Europe might have an unexpected result in the end. Angel's heart was a little confused, but she was smiling like a flower. She walked up to the Pope, who was sitting in the chair and staring down, and took the heretic roster from his hand. She stared down at the roster that had been turned to the end, and looked at the summary. Those who betrayed the glory of God were all heretics. But the last page of the register was not blank. There was also a name there, in both Chinese and English. In the Pope's mind, it was also a heretic, but there was little information. Angel saw a strange name that was a little hard to pronounce. Dongqing Rushi. Angel blinked and glanced at the lifelike Pope sitting in the chair. The 3 popes were doing different things. She didn't know which one was real and which one was fake. She also didn't know what the Pope had just stared at. It was the summary at the end of the page or Dongqing Rushi. Angel thought quietly. She was good at thinking, so she looked very focused. The light in the study flickered. Angel's shadow was printed on the wall, very slender. I hate shadows, the Pope suddenly said, because it's darkness. Darkness is sin. His voice was calm and sure. The look in Angel's eyes changed quietly. She raised her head and stared at the Pope. But shadows always exist, don't they? Of course not. The Pope smiled. He moved his body. The light fell on him, and there was no shadow under his feet. Angel's shadow reflected on the wall also began to disappear gradually. There was only light left in the whole study. That's much better, isn't it? The Pope said with a smile. This is deception. Angel looked at the Pope. Everyone knew that the Pope did not know martial arts, but few people knew that in the spiritual field, the Pope was an absolute guru. As the God in the hearts of more than 1 billion believers, the Pope could not find an opponent in the spiritual field. This meant that his will was absolutely strong, and it also meant that he was the most terrifying hypnotist in the world. He could not find an opponent at all. The Holy Palace, the Holy Church, and even the entire Holy Land could be regarded as the Pope's home field. The Pope did not want Angel to see her own shadow, so Holy Virgin Angel could not see it. Just like the 3 popes in front of her. As a master in the spiritual field, the Holy Virgin could not tell the truth from the falsehood. No. The Pope whispered. This is faith. Only light is the most sacred substance. Darkness is not, and neither is shadow. But the shadow actually exists. It was rare for Angel to be persistent. It does exist. The Pope looked at Angel thoughtfully. I allow the shadow to exist in the light of the Lord, although I don't want to see it. But the shadow that the light of the Lord can't shine on is fallen and should be purified. Angel's face suddenly turned pale. The Arbitration Council still lacks the most suitable candidate. The Pope suddenly said. Angel's delicate body trembled slightly. She lowered her head and said with unprecedented respect, I know what to do. An ancient bell suddenly rang in the Holy Palace. The bell was mellow and deep, spreading throughout the Holy Land. The light in the Holy Land became more and more dazzling. A tall figure wearing a guard's armor walked into the study. It's time for the coronation. The Pope said. Angel, you should go back and prepare. Your Majesty, I accept your coronation, but I still oppose the cooperation with heresy. The guard walked in, took off his helmet, and revealed a face that was famous in the dark world. The third place on the World Divine List, the Saint War Angel of the Vatican, Saint Arcis. I allow the darkness to come close. Because we are the servants of the Lord. When the heresy is redeemed, the darkness will completely dissipate. Arcis, you have to understand that all sins are polluted and distorted glory. In the study, the three lifelike figures of the Pope began to disappear. The Pope, holding a scepter, walked down from the study on the second floor. He was dressed in a white robe, but the scepter in his hand was scarlet like blood. Arcis looked at the scarlet scepter in the Pope's hand, and there was a flash of obsession in his eyes. That was the obsession with absolute power. Be humble in front of the statue of God, the Pope said. Arcis knelt down respectfully. When he saw the scarlet scepter in the Pope's hand, he understood the content of the coronation. Coronation, God's punishment spear. There was a rumor in the dark world. There was always the bravest and most fearless warriors around the Pope, even if there were only ordinary people around him. Such a rumor was not wrong. And the secret was the coronation. In the field of willpower and spirit, the Pope was a well-deserved absolute grandmaster. The so-called coronation was the craziest fighting will that the Pope imposed on the warriors. It was a very sober but similar to hypnosis, which could maximize a person's potential. Arcis used to be the second on the divine list, and now he was the third. And the God's punishment spear was the fiercest fighting will in all coronations. Arcis, who was crowned with the God's punishment spear, was the real Arcis, worthy of the title of the former second on the divine list. Angel watched all this quietly. But the study in her sight gradually became blurred. Angel raised her head in a daze. Only then did she realize that she was standing at the door of the study unconsciously. The sound of pages turning was still in her ears. In the study in her sight, the Pope sat in a chair, staring at the roster in his hand. A gentle and calm voice sounded. It was like a repeat of the previous one. Angel, your heart is in a mess. Can you tell me why? The light was still on. The Pope did not look up. There was no Arcis in front of the statue. Everything was so serene and calm. An indescribable coldness and fear emerged from Angel's heart, instantly occupying all her consciousness. She didn't know if she had just walked into the study. She also didn't know if what she had just seen was true. She also didn't know if what she saw now was true. She didn't know if Arcis was in the study now. But she couldn't see it. The Pope would always only let others see what he wanted others to see. Angel's heart was filled with extreme fear. She shook her head in a panic, bowed, and quickly left the study. The Pope's figure was still sitting in the chair, staring at the roster in his hand. Under the light, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. There was no shadow in front of him. Angel walked out of the Holy Palace quickly. Her heart was beating wildly. After leaving the study in the depths of the Holy Palace, her heart did not relax, but became more and more afraid. Because the memory was dissipating. Everything in the study that she didn't know was real or fake just now began to disappear in her mind bit by bit. She didn't want to forget, but she couldn't control her thoughts. In the end, only a few words of the Pope remained in her mind. She remembered that the Pope asked her to lead the God's punishment priests to Eastern Europe to assist Arcis. As for the others, she didn't remember. She wasn't even sure if she had said something in the study that she wanted to say but had never dared to say. She wasn't sure if the Pope knew the secret of her heart. The gate of the Holy Palace was already behind her. When the guards on the street saw the Holy Virgin, they bowed respectfully. Angel walked across the street in the most elegant manner and entered the holy church opposite the holy palace. A thin figure in the armor of a guard stood in the darkness of the church, facing the statue of God. He did not kneel or pray, as if he was waiting. She heard footsteps. The guard turned his head and chuckled. "Beautiful Holy Virgin. You are finally here. I knew that you would definitely appear here after seeing that old fellow. This is your habit." The guard took off his helmet and revealed his face. His smile was eager, but it was extremely hypocritical. Angel was uneasy. The guard was right. Every time she saw the Pope, she would have a fear from the bottom of her heart. So she would appear here to pray as soon as possible to eliminate all the negative emotions in her heart. But at this time, she didn't expect that there would be someone waiting for her in the holy church. She didn't expect that the person waiting for her would be the person who shouldn't be here at this time. "Mel lad." A touch of coldness gradually appeared in Angel's blue pupils. Her tone was a little low. "You should be praying now and preparing to be crowned by His Majesty the Pope." Our sis was not the only one who had the honor of being crowned. As the second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps, Mel lad was also one. He broke through to the Invincible Realm a year ago, and the news had not been made public. This time, after being crowned by the Pope, his combat capability would soar to another level. Mel lad looked at Angel. His smile was still full of hypocrisy. "Are you sure what you're seeing now is true?" Mel lad said with a playful smile. "Do you remember how you left the Holy Palace and where you are now?" Angel's whole body trembled violently. But then she calmed down. She remembered how she left the Holy Palace. She also remembered that she was in the Holy Church now. There was no deviation in her memory, so everything in front of her was true. "How dare you?" Angel said coldly. "You're too easily excited," Mel lad said softly. "As the noblest Holy Virgin, you should be quiet and patient under any circumstances." His eyes gradually became naked and fiery, as if he wanted to tear apart Angel's clothes and veil with his eyes. "Before being crowned by His Majesty the Pope, you should pray devoutly. You violated the will of His Majesty the Pope. This is blasphemy," Angel said coldly. "So Your Highness the Holy Virgin is going to pronounce me a heretic next?" Mel lad chuckled. Angel subconsciously took a step back and said in a deep voice, "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Mel lad." Mel lad chuckled and said, "Now, I'm just an ordinary guard who wants to make a deal with you." "Are you qualified to make a deal with me?" Angel sneered and said, "I'm the Holy Virgin of the Vatican. If you want to go to Eastern Europe, then I'm qualified to make a deal with you." Mel lad said unhurriedly, "For example, I can keep a shadow for you." "Ah, look at me, I've forgotten. Your Highness the Holy Virgin, you don't even have a surname. It's really pitiful. I think there's a surname in the ancient East that suits you better. What do you think?" "Situ. What do you think?" Melad's smile was a little strange, but his eyes were extremely serious. Angel's body suddenly stiffened. She stared at the deputy commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps in front of her, and her pair of quiet blue eyes almost spewed fire at this time. "What do you want?" Angel said coldly. There was a touch of killing intent in her eyes, but her whole person was still holy and mysterious. "I want a lot," Mel lad said with a smile. "First of all, I need you to accompany me to meet a distinguished guest from afar." "Why do you want me to go?" Angel forced herself to calm down. "Because your identity is noble enough," Mel lad said seriously. "If you're not there, I may die, but I don't want to die." There's another chapter coming soon. Well, when you see this, it should have been updated. Chapter 396. There's still a big chapter ahead. Don't miss it. Oh, this chapter is today. N. 25th. I have to go out during the day, so I can't write it. I haven't stopped updating. The only 5-star hotel in the Holy Land was not far from the Holy Palace. In the sanctuary, the closer a place was to the sacred palace, the more glorious it was. It also meant safety. Qin Wei-bai booked 2 luxury suites on the top floor of the hotel. Lin Fengting had his own room. Qin Wei-bai and Flaming Fire shared a room. They did not leave the sanctuary but waited for news from the sacred palace. Qin Wei-bai needed to judge the entire dark world with the help of the Vatican. The Vatican also needed to use the chosen one of the Samsara Palace to clean up the heretics. The two sides had a basis for cooperation, which was why they had today's negotiation. She would stay in the sacred region for 2 days. After ascertaining the strength of the Vatican, he would formulate his own plan according to the strength of the Vatican. Qin Weibai had a lot to think about. That was why she was not sleepy at all. Flaming Fire sat quietly opposite Qin Weibai and looked down at the brightly lit Holy Land through the window of the balcony. The sacred region was too small, and their position was extremely high. So her gaze easily passed through the almost unshadowed sanctum and landed on Seven Hill City, the capital of Atalos. There were lights in Seven Hill City, but there was also darkness. Compared to the sacred region that was full of lights, the flourishing place where light and darkness mingled was the most realistic. Flaming Fire withdrew her gaze, feeling a little bored. Qin Weibai was also looking out of the window with a teacup in her hand. Her gaze was a little unfocused, and her attention was clearly not focused on the sacred region. Flaming Fire was used to her boss's state. She had been with her boss for a long time. But in most cases when there was no business, Qin Weibai was so silent, and then in silence, she came up with one huge plan after another to promote the development of Samsara Palace. In Flaming Fire's opinion, the boss who was in deep thought was undoubtedly the most charming. Even as a woman, Flaming Fire would unconsciously be intoxicated by him. The two sat on the balcony in silence. Qin Weibai's natural body fragrance wafted over. Flaming Fire sniffed quietly. A touch of happiness quietly appeared on her pretty face, which had always been cold and elegant in the past. This was the scent that made her feel at ease the most. In order to pursue this scent, she would rather fall from the human world straight to hell. Qin Weibai moved a little and took a sip of tea. "Boss, want to play chess?" Flaming Fire asked softly. Qin Weibai shook her head. All her thoughts were now immersed in the chaos of Snow Country. The Samsara Palace had the strongest sword, but it was also the weakest force. In such a situation, she needed the power that could be used, whether it came from an enemy or a friend, as long as it could be used. It was because of this that she decided to go to the sanctuary. She was in good contact with the Vatican, but she did not have enough power. After all, she was not only concerned about the Wang family of Beihai. He wanted to judge the entire dark world. Then he would have to be the enemy of the entire dark world. How much power was enough? "Look for Mr. Lin," Qin Weibai suddenly said. "If he's not asleep, I'll treat him to tea." Flaming Fire answered, stood up, walked out of the room, and knocked on the door of the suite opposite. Lin Fengting quickly opened the door and raised his eyebrows in confusion. "Boss, please have a cup of tea," Flaming Fire said expressionlessly. Lin Fengting was really good-tempered. He smiled and nodded. He followed Flaming Fire into the room and sat down opposite Qin Weibai. "Can't sleep?" he asked with a chuckle. "Isn't it the same for Mr. Lin?" Qin Weibai smiled and handed Lin Fengting a cup of tea. The tea was ordinary and tasteless. Lin Fengting wanted to smoke, but he resisted. He shook his head and said with a smile, "I'm your bodyguard this time." A bodyguard should have the consciousness of a bodyguard. People always say that the Pope doesn't know martial arts, but today I see that the old man is not simple. He's even dangerous. Now that I'm so close to him, how can I sleep well? The Pope really doesn't know martial arts. Qin Weibai said calmly. Lin Fengting raised his eyebrows, picked up the teacup, and said nothing. But not knowing martial arts doesn't mean that he's not dangerous. Qin Weibai said softly, "In the spiritual field, he's a well-deserved god, the strongest hypnotist, and no one can match him." Hypnosis. Lin Fengting had a headache. The ancestor of the Lin clan once had an amazing hypnotist. This kind of person could not know martial arts, but sometimes he was more terrifying than any expert. That kind of unpredictable weirdness was more helpless than fighting with real knives and guns. The strongest hypnotist? Didn't that mean that even an invincible realm expert could fall into it if he was not careful? Is he a threat to people like us? Lin Fengting asked in an incredulous tone. The tenacity of the willpower at the peak of the invincible realm was completely impeccable. The spiritual field. How could their spirits be worse than others when they could reach the peak of the invincible realm in martial arts? It shouldn't be. Qin Weibai shook her head. You have to see him with your own eyes. In the face of an expert at the peak of the invincible realm, he shouldn't be able to do too much, unless you are willing or in a seriously injured and unstable state. But in the Pope's state, it's extremely difficult for an expert like you to kill him. We just saw him at noon. Lin Fengting reminded her with a stiff expression. It's fake. Qin Weibai shook her head. We didn't even go into his study at noon. The corner of Lin Fengting's mouth twitched fiercely. Isn't that the same as being fooled? Lin Fengting said helplessly. He can confuse you, but he can't threaten you. I can barely protect myself in front of him. But it's impossible for me to do anything to him. Anyway, this kind of person is not to be trifled with. He is the Pope, a deity who can be said to be the largest force in the world. How can he be ordinary? Just try not to get in touch with this kind of person in the future. Qin Weibai smiled. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes and nodded. You called me here just to talk about the Pope? He asked. No. Qin Weibai shook her head and seemed to be a little hesitant. Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai quietly and waited for her to continue. The Pope can't be trusted. Qin Weibai said, the power of the Vatican can be used, but at critical moments, we still need to rely on the most trustworthy power. I don't have enough power in my hands. Lin Fengting's eyes remained unchanged and he looked at Qin Weibai quietly. I want to borrow troops from the Lin clan. Qin Weibai whispered. Lin Fengting was silent. Qin Weibai also fell silent. How many people? Lin Fengting suddenly asked. 300 people. Shen Yuan's sword. Qin Weibai didn't look at Lin Fengting. She just quietly looked at the teacup in front of her. Shen Yuan's sword was not a sword. It was the most elite super troop of the Lin clan. Its average strength was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. It was a super elite enough to compete with the heaven punishment troop of the Wang family of Beihai and the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican. 300 people were all the Shen Yuan's sword had. It was one of the trump cards of the headquarters of the Lin clan. In recent decades, it had been replaced by several generations, but it had never been used. If such a force was controlled by Qin Weibai, it could completely make up for the largest group of elites that the Samsara Palace lost in Snow Country, and the overall strength would be much higher than before. Lin Fengting was silent for a long time. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it almost froze. Do you remember what I said before? Lin Fengting suddenly asked. The Lin clan doesn't enter the secular world? Qin Weibai asked. No. Lin Fengting shook his head. I invited you before. Qin Weibai fell silent. After Snow Country, I hope you can control the Lin clan for me for 20 years. The master of Samsara Palace refused, and you didn't reply. Lin Fengting said. He emphasized the words, master of Samsara Palace. Qin Weibai was still silent. If I can live. After a long time, Qin Weibai said softly. It's my business whether you can live or not. Lin Fengting's eyes were resolute, and he said meaningfully, I will do my best. It's your business whether you want to live or not. Qin Weibai's face was a little pale. There were countless people in the world who were unwilling to face the world. There were only two extreme reasons. Because the world was too cruel. Because the world was too warm. If you tell Tianlan some things, he may not blame you, and you will not become enemies. Lin Fengting said calmly. Do you believe what you said? Qin Weibai looked up at Lin Fengting. Lin Fengting was silent. He really didn't know whether he believed it or not. If he couldn't figure it out, he would not think about it. Lin Fengting asked simply, Are you willing to do it? Qin Weibai was silent again. After a long time, she nodded. She took a deep breath and said, Yes. She didn't say whether she was willing or not. She just said yes. Lin Fengting laughed. He took a pendant from his neck. The pendant was scarlet and small, in the shape of a sword. Put it on. Lin Fengting said. Remember your promise. Qin Weibai took it and whispered, The Shen Yuan sword. Don't ask me. Lin Fengting shook his head, lowered his head to drink tea and said flatly, From now on, you are the patriarch of the Lin clan. There was one thing he didn't say. But Qin Weibai already understood. The patriarch of the Lin clan could mobilize more than the Shen Yuan sword. Thank you. Qin Weibai held the pendant tightly in her hand. Lin Fengting shook his head. If you think you owe Tianlan, then the Lin clan owes you. You don't have to thank me. Qin Weibai's mouth moved. When she was about to speak, there was a sudden knock on the door. The three people on the balcony raised their heads at the same time and looked at the door. "Who is it?" Flaming Fire's tone was cold. There was no response from outside the door, but the knocking was still ringing, neither fast nor slow. Qin Weibai and Flaming Fire looked at each other. Lin Fengting remained calm. There were many experts in the Holy Land. Arsis was strong. The Pope was dangerous. But the Holy Land was too small. Lin Fengting couldn't destroy the Holy Land with one sword, but if he wanted to take Qin Weibai away, no one could stop him. Flaming Fire took a deep breath and glanced at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai nodded. Flaming Fire walked over, opened the door calmly, and raised her eyebrows slightly. A woman in white stood quietly outside the door. The woman's face was covered with a veil, revealing only a pair of charming blue eyes. She was followed by a guard of the Holy Palace wrapped in armor, who seemed to be protecting her. Flaming Fire frowned slightly. "Let me introduce myself." The woman smiled and said elegantly, "I'm Angel." On the balcony, Qin Weibai raised her head and stood up at the same time. "Your Highness the Holy Virgin of the Vatican?" She walked over slowly and asked calmly. "That's me." Angel nodded with a smile and looked at Qin Weibai. Her eyes were a little curious and amazed. "Come in." Qin Weibai's tone was brief. Angel walked in slowly, and so did the guard beside her. Qin Weibai frowned. As the Holy Virgin of the Vatican, she was visiting others in the Holy Palace. Even her bodyguard followed her in. Was she being overly cautious? Or was it something else? Whatever the reason, she couldn't see Angel's sincerity. "What's the matter?" Qin Weibai asked. Angel's face also became cold. "I have nothing to do." She took a step to the side and pointed to the guard who came in with her. "He's looking for you." Qin Weibai was stunned and looked at the guard beside Angel. Before she could figure out what a guard who could trouble the Holy Virgin to lead the way in person meant, the guard standing quietly in the room had already laughed. His smile was low and evil, hoarse like a night owl. Qin Weibai's bright eyes narrowed slightly and she said calmly, "Take off your helmet." "Of course." The god smiled and said, "This is the minimum sincerity." The Holy Virgin Angel looked blank. But Qin Weibai was a little surprised. The guard spoke Chinese, and his pronunciation was perfect, without any awkwardness. But under the helmet was a very standard white face. This was a middle-aged white man about 40 years old. He had fiery red hair and a tough face. He was a well-deserved middle-aged handsome man. Qin Weibai knew this person. So she was a little surprised. Because in the information she had, the person in front of her didn't know Chinese. "Mel lad?" she asked in a low voice. She felt a little strange in her heart. It was a feeling that things were gradually getting out of control. It was very annoying. She didn't like it at all. "Oh, you really know my identity." Mel lad smiled very happily, and his eyes looked extremely eager. "You are my goddess, one of the ladies I respect most." Qin Weibai said calmly, "Your identity? Does the second chief Mel lad have another identity?" "This is a secret, but I don't mind sharing it with you." Mel lad chuckled. He glanced at Angel and said, "The Holy Virgin's acting skills are very good. You must not know that the Holy Virgin's Chinese is very good, but I don't mind. Let me introduce myself. I'm Mel lad, the second chief of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican. But I still like my other name, or code name." Mel lad laughed and looked proud. "My name is Disciple." "Disciple?" Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes tightly. "Whose disciple?" "Of course, it's His Highness Disciple." Mel lad laughed. "Which Highness?" Qin Weibai asked in a low voice. "A Highness who wants to cooperate with you," Mel lad said seriously. Qin Weibai laughed. Qin Weibai laughed. Her face was sharp and delicate, and her eyebrows and eyes were cold. As the corners of her mouth rose, her whole person carried a kind of lofty arrogance. "So, your Highness doesn't have a name? You know him. He's not your enemy, but it's not convenient for him to reveal his name." Mel lad said. "You're playing tricks." Qin Weibai turned directly and said in a flat tone, "Flaming Fire, see the guest out. You shouldn't question my sincerity." Mel lad looked at Qin Weibai's back. You have tried many people in the Holy Palace. This makes me sure of your purpose. If you really want to trace a list from many years ago, My Highness can provide it to you. He paused. It's at least 80% of the list. Qin Weibai did not turn around. But everyone present could feel that her body was slightly tense, and it had been tense to the limit. Mellad grinned. My Highness once talked about a friend. He said that she was a very strange person. She abandoned time in the most beautiful period of her life, but she didn't give up day and night. I don't. Mr. Lin. Qin Weibai turned around in an instant. Kill him. Her tone was unprecedentedly sharp, and there was a touch of madness in her eyes. Lin Fengting did not hesitate. He was the former patriarch of the Lin clan. The former patriarch was also a member of the Lin clan. And now it was the acting patriarch of the Lin clan who wanted to kill him. In an instant, sword light appeared in the living room with soft light. The sword light was dazzling. Melad's expression changed dramatically, and his whole body shook violently. The domain of the invincible realm appeared in an instant. The whole living room was completely frozen. The living room was extremely quiet. But the sword moved extremely fast. The surging sword light condensed into one point, and a bolt of lightning suddenly appeared in the frozen space. The extremely sharp sword light tore the domain apart in an instant. The sword intent surged in the broken domain, but it did not overflow at all. Instead, it circulated repeatedly around the sword edge, as if it was superimposed. In the blink of an eye, the sword in Lin Fengting's hand was several times more terrifying than when he had drawn it out. The sword edge pierced straight into Melad's chest. Mellad suddenly let out a low roar. He put his palms together in an instant. The sharp peak in Lin Fengting's hand paused slightly. Melad's entire body flew out and smashed hard against the wall. The whole floor shook with a loud bang. Lin Fengting's eyes narrowed tightly. He didn't use all his strength in this sword strike, so it didn't cause much serious damage. But this didn't mean that this sword strike wasn't strong. He was at the peak of the invincible realm. In terms of strength, he was enough to enter the top 3 on the divine list. A casual sword strike was also a sword strike on the divine list. He also knew Mellad. The second commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican was definitely a famous figure in the Dark World. But in the intelligence system of the Lin clan, he only had the combat capability of the invincible realm. But in that instant, the strength that the other party had shown was absolutely incredible. With such strength, he was not far from our sis, who had not been crowned. This was clearly a super expert who was close to the peak of the invincible realm. Follower? Whose follower? Lin Fengting took a step forward, and his eyes were completely focused. Does it make sense? Mellad shouted angrily. I came with the Holy Virgin. If you kill me, can you walk out of the Holy Land alive? Well, even if you can, does it make sense? Not only will you become enemies with the Vatican, but you will also lose a powerful ally. Qin Weibai stood there. Her body trembled slightly, and her delicate red lips were also gently opening and closing. For a moment, her mood fluctuated, and she seemed to be unable to speak. Flaming Fire had never seen the boss in this state. His emotions fluctuated violently. He wanted to destroy everything with madness and sadness, as well as a little surprise and disbelief that he had lost his usual calmness. Countless complex emotions flickered in his pupils. Flaming Fire didn't know why the boss was so excited. She thought of the words of Mellad, who claimed to be a follower. Some people abandoned time, but did not give up day and night. Who is your highness? After a long time, Qin Weibai said coldly. Her voice was obviously trembling. At this stage, he is your friend. At least he will provide you with the list you want. The follower stood up straight and wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. All his spirits were locked on Lin Fengting, and he was fully prepared for the attack that the other party would hit him at any time. Friend! Qin Weibai sneered and said, if he can provide that list, he is one of the people I want to find the most. He just received the invitation, but he did not participate. The follower said, otherwise, he would not dare to come to you. Qin Weibai stared at the follower coldly. The follower looked at Qin Weibai calmly. Where is the list? Qin Weibai suddenly said. In a safe place. When we arrive in Eastern Europe, I will give it to you. The follower smiled. Believe me, goddess. At this stage, We deserve your trust more than anyone else. So not only will you get the list, but you will also get my help. I am not only the deputy commander of the Holy Disarmament Corps of the Vatican, but I am also willing to be the sword in your hand in this Eastern European chaos. Because at present, most of the people you want to try are also the people we want to deal with. The words were straightforward and naked. Qin Weibai suddenly glanced at Angel, and her eyes were obscure. You should know the secret of Her Highness the Holy Virgin without me telling you. The follower was not flustered. She may not be trustworthy, but she will not reveal our deal. Angel snorted softly, but there was some panic in her eyes. She was the Holy Virgin of the Vatican. But saints still had secrets. But at this time, she suddenly felt as if she were completely transparent in front of these people in front of her. The follower knew everything about her. Qin Weibai also knew. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time. She seemed to have completely calmed down, and all the emotions disappeared from her little by little. After a long time she slowly turned around and said coldly, I see. The follower narrowed his eyes and chuckled. This will be the most pleasant cooperation. I can guarantee it with my character. He put on his helmet. The conversation was over. Holy Virgin Angel walked out of the room with the follower again. Lin Fengting sent the two of them out quietly, but he was not in a hurry to go back. The footsteps of the two of them were getting farther and farther away. Vaguely, Angel's suppressed angry voice sounded. What else do you want? I want a bottle of fusion. This should be within the authority of Her Highness the Holy Virgin. You see, I am a gentleman and never make any excessive requests. Lin Fengting narrowed his eyes, returned to the room and whispered. He wants a bottle of fusion that belongs to the Vatican. Fusion. One of the top gene potions of the Vatican. Qin Weibai nodded and held the teacup. She did not seem surprised. Lin Fengting looked at Qin Weibai quietly. He also remembered the follower's words. Some people abandon time, but did not give up day and night. He didn't know why Qin Weibai was so excited. He just felt that this sentence was a little contradictory. If he really abandoned time, how could he not give up day and night? And who was the highness behind the follower? Chapter 397. Tongming Temple on West Mountain had been abandoned for 3 years. In the eyes of many locals of Yuzhou, this was a reckless waste of natural resources. West Mountain of Yuzhou was very quiet and had a pleasant environment. Tongming Temple was one of the buildings with the longest history in West Mountain. The beauty of West Mountain was no less than that of Green Mountain. But this area had been the most mysterious place in Jianghu State since the founding of the People's Republic. It was conservatively estimated that there were at least 20 military bases with different functions in the entire West Mountain. The famous Eastern Excalibur Special Brigade of the Central Theater of Operations of Jianghu State was stationed here. This was the mysterious and iron-blooded West Mountain. A few years ago, Tongming Temple was one of the few tourist attractions in West Mountain. But 3 years ago, Tongming Temple was taken over by Kunlun City and became the headquarters of the Snow Dance Corps in Jianghu State. With the decisive Battle of Heaven Capital, the Snow Dance Corps was disbanded, and Tongming Temple became abandoned. In the past 3 years, the local government had applied to the army headquarters in Kunlun City in an attempt to reopen Tongming Temple. Although there were no Buddha statues in Tongming Temple, the environment in the Green Mountains and clear waters was enough to set up a top club in Jianghu State. Not only would it increase taxes for the government, but businessmen would also get a lot of benefits. However, Kunlun City had never relented. Now, with the restart of the Snow Dance Corps, it had once again become the base of the Snow Dance Corps in Jianghu State. For 2 days after the high-level meeting, Li Tianlan had been staying in Tongming Temple. Time was running out. The entire special warfare system of Jianghu State was in action. As the only special warfare corps established after the Border Control Corps in Jianghu State, and it was a sharp sword for foreign expeditions, the high-level officials had extremely high requirements for the Snow Dance Corps. In an elite corps of 20,000 people, the minimum threshold for soldiers was the Qi-controlling realm. The basic officers were required to have the strength of the ice-condensing realm. The minimum requirement for middle-level officers was the fire-flaming realm, and the high-level officials were all at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. The framework of the Special Warfare Corps of 20,000 people was not large, but it was extremely complete. Completeness also meant finesse. So Li Tianlan was very busy. He was pushed to a high position without preparation. He had not adapted to the change of identity at all. He had to form a special warfare corps with the most combat effectiveness in a limited time. Tongming Temple was also very busy. In 2 days, countless materials entered Tongming Temple and fell into Li Tianlan's hands. Kunlun City, the 4 special warfare headquarters, and the elites of the special operations bureaus of each province all appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. The elites of various theaters of operations, legions, and special forces were also within Li Tianlan's choice. Information about the major martial arts forces was also piled up on his desk. The leaders of the General Staff Department, General Political Department, General Armament Department, and General Logistics Department would come over almost every day. The General Staff Department provided some tactical suggestions. The General Political Department assisted Li Tianlan in taking charge of the personnel transfer of the Snowdance Corps. The General Assembly provided equipment and weapons, and the General Logistics Department finalized logistics. Massive, rigorous, yet chaotic. Everything looked extremely hasty. In the encampment of the Snowdance Corps in Tongming Temple, there would be changes almost every hour. For the time being, Li Tianlan still hadn't adapted to the change of identity, but he had to bite the bullet and carry on. In terms of the formation of the corps, Jianghu State did fully respect Li Tianlan's will. Nearly 15,000 soldiers of the 20,000-strong Special Warfare Battalion were from the Border Control Corps. To be exact, they were from the 40,000 troops transferred to the Sky Academy by Dongqing Wudi. The 4 generals headed by Li Zhonghu were also transferred from the Border Control Corps to the Snowdance Corps. In terms of level, the Snowdance Corps could be said to be an organization at the same level as the 5 theaters of operations. But it had a small number of people and a relatively single type of troops, so the organization was simplified as much as possible. The Snowdance Corps was headed by the marshal, with a vice-marshal, 2 deputy marshals, a supervisor, and a chief of staff. They formed the highest decision-making level of the Snowdance Corps. Under the corps were 2 divisional organizations, which were very orthodox. Different organizations shared different responsibilities from company, barracks, regimental headquarters to division headquarters, and finally formed a whole. Li Tianlan now had a rough list in his hand. He had contacted a lot of people in the past 2 days. There were many people who were kind to the Li family and hostile to the Li family. Most of the people Li Tianlan came into contact with, whether good or bad, basically gave him a clear attitude. So he knew very well that he had a good hand now. Marshal Yi Dongxing, the Deputy Minister of the Army Headquarters of Jianghu State, the Chief of Staff, and known as the God of Army, also felt that Li Tianlan had a good hand when he looked at the list drafted by Li Tianlan. From Li Tianlan's point of view, this list was simply gorgeous beyond words. The list was not long. But Yi Dongxing looked very carefully and cautiously. In the office of the army commander of Tongming Temple, everyone looked carefully and cautiously. Li Tianlan, dressed in a decent military uniform and with the rank of marshal, sat behind the wide conference table. He quietly observed the big shots in the conference room and patiently waited for their reaction. Yi Dongsheng, the Minister of the General Staff, represented the Southeast Group. Fang Wenxi, the Minister of General Political Affairs, represented the Prince Group. Sun Zhiyu, the Minister of Defense, represented the Special Warfare Group. Hua Qingfeng, the Minister of Security of Jianghu State, represented the academics. The northern faction still stayed out of it. Li Tianlan represented the giant group. The representatives of the 5 groups were silent. There was not much time. The preparation of the Snowdance Corps had reached the final stage. Li Tianlan, the army commander, drew up a list. The 4 big shots who assisted Li Tianlan in establishing the Snowdance Corps were responsible for approving it. If the opinions of the 5 people reached a consensus, they would report it to the army headquarters in Kunlun City at the same time. The Army Headquarters and the Special Warfare System would hold an internal meeting to confirm the list and report it to the Cabinet and the Hidden Dragon Sea for final confirmation. Yi Dongsheng read the list in his hand bit by bit. There were too many names on the list that he was familiar with. Cool Breeze, Drifting Cloud, and Deep Dream of Sai City. Han Chongyang, the Yin and Yang Swordmaster of Mount Shu. Yun Qinshi, the Phantom Swordmaster. Su Chang'e, the Sword Justice of Jade Pool. Ling Shuangxue, the First Elder. Hua Qingfeng, the Sect Master of the Shadow Sect. All the famous experts in Jianghu state held different important positions in the snow dance corps. It was foreseeable that once these people joined the snow dance corps, they would definitely stand on Li Tianlan's side. Cool Breeze and Drifting Cloud were both candidates for the deputy commander of the snow dance corps. The candidate for the chief of staff was Han Chongyang, the sect master of the Shadow sect. There were 6 people at the highest decision-making level in the snow dance corps. But after entering Eastern Europe, there were 7 people. There was also a general of the giant group, Jianghu, the current commander of the Arctic Ocean Command. Among the higher-ups, Li Tianlan would have an absolute advantage. At the grassroots level, nearly 3/4 of the soldiers came from the Border Control Corps. Now it had only been 2 days since the final maneuver. No one would forget the scene of 40,000 troops kneeling on one knee to Li Tianlan at the same time after the maneuver. This was indeed a good hand. As long as Li Tianlan was not stupid, his authority in the snow dance corps would be unshakable. This also showed that when Dongqing Wudi and Wang Tianzong sat at the gambling table, the giant group, Jade Pool, and Sai City had all clearly taken sides. And Mount Shu and the academics also supported part of the power. Yi Dongxing's face was calm, but there was a little surprise in the depths of his eyes. He waved the list in his hand and said with a smile, "Your Highness has thought it through. I agree with this list. Marshal Yi is known as the god of army. I feel at ease to get your affirmation." Li Tianlan chuckled, but his eyes were indifferent. "I agree with this list, too." Hua Qingfeng, the Minister of Security of Jianghu State, smiled and was the second to express his attitude. He was the candidate for the Chief of Staff of the Snow Dance Corps. As one of the core forces of the academics, the sect master of the Shadow sect personally joined Li Tianlan's Snow Dance Corps. The support of the academics was great. The other 2 frowned slightly, hesitated for a moment, and finally nodded without saying much. In the discussion of the 5 people, 3 of them had already made their attitudes clear. Even if they had different opinions, it was useless. "I will collect some opinions from within the Snow Dance Corps, sort them out, and report them to the army headquarters and Kunlun City together with this list." Fang Wenxi, the Minister of the General Administration, stood up and smiled. "Your Highness, if there is no accident, the Snow Dance Corps can be completely determined tonight." Li Tianlan nodded, stood up and reached out his hand. "Thank you, Minister Fang." Fang Wenxi shook his head, shook hands with Li Tianlan, and turned to leave first. Yi Dongxing narrowed his eyes and chuckled. "Your Highness's courage and spirit are really amazing." Li Tianlan glanced at him and said indifferently, "Marshal Yi, do you have anything to teach me?" "No." Yi Dongsheng wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally he smiled and said, "It's just a sigh." He looked at Li Tianlan with a complicated look in his eyes. Those who knew Yi Dongxing's upward trajectory knew his story. The Yi family of Yuzhou was a well-deserved wealthy family in Jianghu state. In Yuzhou, it was one of the few behemoths whose foundation could be compared with the Bai family. In the past hundreds of years, it was a wealthy family that had produced more than one president. It had always been in the first-line sequence of the Southeast Group. It had always had a close relationship with the Wang family of Beihai, advancing and retreating together. But as for Yi Dongsheng himself, he was a capable man cultivated and promoted by Li Honghe. He respected and admired Li Honghe, but his personal relationship with Wang Tianzong was also deep. The contradiction of personal feelings. The contradiction between his personal position and the family position suddenly became extremely clear after the collapse of the Li family. No one knew if Yi Dongsheng had experienced a struggle in his heart, but his current position had already explained his choice. Yi Dongxing felt helpless. For many years, he had been standing by Wang Tianzong's side. But every time he saw Li Tianlan, he would still think of Li Honghe's cultivation and promotion of him in those years. He wanted to remind Li Tianlan of something, even if it was only a few words. But when the words came to his mouth, he didn't know how to say them. It seemed that he couldn't say them either. Yi Dongsheng raised his hand. He put the list in his hand on the desk in front of Li Tianlan and looked deeply into Li Tianlan's eyes. Li Tianlan's eyes were calm and indifferent, stable and deep. "Your Highness, be careful. I wish you a triumphant return as soon as possible." Yi Dongsheng smiled and said softly. Li Tianlan glanced at him and nodded. "Thank you." Yi Dongsheng turned and left. Li Tianlan looked at his back and was silent for a long time. He could feel Yi Dongxing's complicated mood at that moment. So his last sentence of, "Be careful," was particularly meaningful. Li Tianlan knew what that sentence meant. Because everyone in Jianghu State was looking forward to him taking out the list. Li Tianlan was the core of the Snowdance Corps, but the entire Snowdance Corps was the result of the joint action of several wealthy families and forces in Jianghu State. The specific composition of the Snowdance Corps was also equivalent to the attitude of the wealthy families. Wang Tianzong's purpose of supporting Li Tianlan's promotion was self-evident. Perhaps he had never said that he wanted to replicate the treason case 20 years ago. But at this time, no one would ignore that possibility. The chaos in Eastern Europe was so dangerous, which also meant that the wealthy families might have different choices. Wang Tianzong and Dongqing Wudi were sitting on the gambling table at this time. Once Wang Tianzong started the treason case, it meant the beginning of the cruelest game between the Giant Group and the Southeast Group. If he won, Li Tianlan would get the Snowdance Corps and the expected prospects in the future. If he lost, the Giant Group would be doomed eternally. In everyone's view, such a gambling game was unfair, so Dongqing Wudi had other choices. He couldn't get off the gambling table now, but he could choose to throw away the cards in his hand when Wang Tianzong put down his chips. Although he would lose the chips he put down at the beginning, at least he wouldn't lose all of them. Although Dongqing Wudi was a director of Jianghu State and the executive minister of the army headquarters, it was not shameful to lose to Wang Tianzong and the Wang family of Beihai. So the list that Li Tianlan took out became the key to Dongqing Wudi's choice. If Li Tianlan took out a bad card and there were no real figures in the Snowdance Corps, it proved that Dongqing Wudi gave up the cards in his hand and Li Tianlan. But now, Dongqing Wudi gave Li Tianlan a good card. More than 10,000 of the strongest elites of the Border Control Corps, several famous experts and generals of the Dongqing clan, and even persuaded the sword justice and first elder of Jade Pool. On the gambling table between Dongqing Wudi and Wang Tianzong, he not only did not throw away the cards in his hand, but also bet all his chips fiercely. Even Sai City, Jade Pool, and even Mount Shu and the academics had never given up their support for Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan would have the absolute right to speak in the Snowdance Corps. But could all of this change the final outcome? No one could predict the result. Li Tianlan's good cards were worthy of the name. But the problem was that for everyone today, Wang Tianzong was equivalent to a king bomb. What kind of good cards could resist him? Be careful. Li Tianlan lowered his head, deep in thought. This, "be careful," was like a reminder or a courtesy. Li Tianlan didn't understand what Yi Dongsheng meant. "General Yi still can't let go of Senior Li's help." A gentle voice suddenly rang out. "However, that's all he can do. This reminder is also the greatest amount of support he can offer. He has a good relationship with Wang Tianzong, and they are like brothers. He can't give your highness any other help." Li Tianlan raised his head, a little surprised. Standing in front of him was Hua Qingfeng, the Minister of Security of Jianghu State. He didn't leave the office after the discussion. His mentality is quite contradictory. Li Tianlan smiled calmly, took out a cigarette, and handed it to Hua Qingfeng. "It's really contradictory." Hua Qingfeng took the cigarette, took a deep breath, and said calmly, "But who doesn't? For example, I came here this time to represent the academic support for your highness. Now we are friends. But if the Wang family of Beihai really starts another case of treason and repeats the tragedy more than 20 years ago, when the general trend is settled, the academics will also stand on the side of the Southeast Group." Li Tianlan glanced at Hua Qingfeng, and his eyes were a little strange. He was not surprised by the academics' choice. No matter how close an ally was, it was a completely different concept from one's own people. In the Snow Empire, before he truly entered a hopeless situation, the academy would always support his actions. But if the general trend was really set and could not be reversed, it was reasonable for the academics to abandon him and cooperate with the Southeast Group. This had nothing to do with being despicable or shameless. It was just the simplest choice and trade-off in politics, in order to pursue a new balance. Everyone could understand the reason. But Li Tianlan didn't expect Hua Qingfeng to say it. "It's very realistic," Li Tianlan said with a smile, "but it's acceptable. I can't change the academy's choice at the last moment, but I can change my approach," Hua Qingfeng said. Li Tianlan chuckled and didn't comment. He walked to the window and looked out at the Tongming temple with birds singing and flowers fragrant. The early morning sun fell, and the temple was peaceful. Hua Qingfeng looked at his back. Until today. This was the second time he saw Li Tianlan, but they were two completely opposite feelings. When they first met in front of the building of the army headquarters, Li Tianlan was pure and calm. But now Li Tianlan. He was wearing a military uniform with the highest military rank in Jianghu state. He was so young that his military rank, military uniform, and his figure looked a little weird. But in fact, this military uniform actually fit him very well. He stood there with his back to Hua Qingfeng. He was still pure, but there was a hint of looming strength and thinking. "Your Highness, you don't believe me?" Hua Qingfeng asked. "If I'm destined to fall, will the sect leader really change his choice? Even if he does, what's the point?" Li Tianlan asked. He called the sect leader, not the minister. The former represented the shadow sect. The latter represented himself. The latter, on the other hand, represented the elites of the academy. Hua Qingfeng's eyes narrowed and he said seriously, "If things really come to that point, I'll go with the flow. Although I'm not talented, I know the consequences of going against the general trend. But before things come to that point, the shadow sect is willing to support your highness unreservedly." His words were very clear. There was another meaning in this sentence. Even though the academics had expressed their support for him, they had their reservations. Li Tianlan didn't move and said expressionlessly, could express many meanings, such as doubt, affirmation, questioning, or contempt. Hua Qingfeng didn't know what this meant for a moment. He was silent for a while and said calmly, "The shadow sect is willing to cooperate with your highness without reservation." "What's the reason?" Li Tianlan asked. Hua Qingfeng hesitated and finally said with a wry smile, "You can think of it as self-protection." Self-protection? Li Tianlan turned around and looked at Hua Qingfeng. Hua Qingfeng's strength was definitely not weak. Any expert of the half-step invincible realm, or even the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, was enough to be a rare expert in a country. The shadow sect was not weak either. Hua Qingfeng's disciples were all over Jianghu state. With his current status and the special nature of the shadow sect, as long as the academics protected him, he and the shadow sect would be safe. "The president wants to hurt you?" Li Tianlan's eyes were a little playful. "Of course the president won't hurt me," Hua Qingfeng said with a wry smile, but it's hard for him to put his mind on the special warfare system. The rise of the academics is too short, and it doesn't have a very prominent background. It can even be said to be a civilian cadre. Our strength in the special warfare system is extremely weak. Over the years, although Principal Zhuang Huayang has cultivated many talents in the special warfare system for the academics, compared with the Southeast Group and the Prince Group, we are still far behind. The academics chose you at the beginning. The president also consulted me about the 10-year plan. Now the 10-year plan still counts, but your relationship with the giant group has caused some disagreements within the academics. Some people in the group have even suggested that the president focus on the military and politics and temporarily give up the right to speak in the special warfare system. Go on. Li Tianlan nodded. The president is under a lot of pressure. Although the academics is now the ruling group, it is destined to be restrained because of its lack of foundation. After the president retires, it will also be jointly squeezed by several other groups. The president's layout is very difficult. At this time, if there is no accident, it is a very correct choice for the group to focus on the military and politics. The president is likely to accept this suggestion. So, Li Tianlan looked at Hua Qingfeng and said, "If the president accepts this suggestion, are you worried that the shadow sect is likely to become one of the bargaining chips in the deal between the president and other groups?" Hua Qingfeng was a little helpless, but he still nodded. Li Tianlan was silent. In fact, Dongqing Wudi had talked about this problem with him for a long time, especially the shadow sect, which was evaluated by Dongqing Wudi as one of the most worthy targets. What Hua Qingfeng didn't know was that the truth was actually more exaggerated than he had predicted, and the pressure on President Li Huaqing was also much greater than he had imagined. After all, the rise of the academics was too short. They stood at the commanding heights of power, but it was difficult for them to suppress the veteran groups. With the help of Li Huaqing's position, it was rare for them to not fall into a disadvantageous position. Li Huaqing's term of office still had 3 to 4 years. He had to make arrangements for the academics in advance after he retired, and strive to not be squeezed too badly by the major groups. There was no doubt that the academics wanted to get more bargaining chips to use in the future by focusing on the military and politics. However, according to Dongqing Wudi's analysis, it was extremely difficult for Li Huaqing to achieve this goal, and he was bound to give up some other things. Li Tianlan thought about the inside story that Dongqing Wudi had told him. After a long silence he asked, "What can you give me?" Hua Qingfeng was shocked. At present, the power I can mobilize in the shadow sect without being noticed is limited, but they are all elites. There will be about 5 thunder-shocking realm experts, one of whom is at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. There are also 20 fire-flaming realm experts. Hua Qingfeng said, "These people can become your highness's personal soldiers." 5 thunder-shocking realm experts and 20 fire-flaming realm experts. Although only one of them was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, such a force was not weak anywhere. Li Tianlan nodded. He was not excited but continued to ask, "What do you want?" "Survival." Hua Qingfeng said, "If you win in Eastern Europe this time, you will play an important role in Jianghu state. I hope that the shadow sect can continue to survive in the special warfare system of Jianghu state." Li Tianlan nodded silently and suddenly said, "I don't want your personal soldiers." Hua Qingfeng's face changed. Li Tianlan continued, "But I need this force. If they can be completely trusted, I will ask them to go to Snow Country to find a person. Do you mind?" "Find who?" Hua Qingfeng asked. "Find my woman." Li Tianlan said, "Now she needs protection and strength more than I do." He did not say the name, but Hua Qingfeng already knew who it was. His tone was a little bitter. "Boss Qin? She is the enemy." In the eyes of the current camp of Jianghu state, Qin Weibai and the Samsara Palace were indeed no longer friends, but enemies. "She is my woman," Li Tianlan said heavily. Hua Qingfeng did not understand the meaning of this sentence for a while. It took him a long time to react. Qin Weibai was Li Tianlan's woman. Naturally, she would not harm him. Li Tianlan was the commander of the Snow Dance Corps of Jianghu state. Qin Weibai would not harm Li Tianlan, nor would she harm Jianghu state. "Okay," Hua Qingfeng said, "I will communicate with my people. They may die." Li Tianlan turned around again and looked out of the window. "I have no regrets," Hua Qingfeng said in a deep voice and turned to leave the conference room. Hua Qingfeng walked very fast. He was not in the mood to enjoy the scenery in Tongming Temple. He just wanted to return to the Shadow Sect as soon as possible and send the power he had accumulated to Snow Country. When he walked out of the temple gate, Hua Qingfeng's footsteps paused. A middle-aged man with the rank of marshal was standing there, as if waiting for him to come out. He smiled calmly and gently. "Marshal Yi?" Hua Qingfeng raised his eyebrows. He was a little surprised and vigilant, and his eyes became a little cold. He finally walked out of Li Tianlan's office. In the eyes of others, this was an accident. But there was nothing against the rules. Yi Dongsheng blocked him here, which was a little bullying. "Minister Hua, don't get me wrong." Yi Dongsheng smiled and waved his hand. "I don't mean anything else. I just want to talk to you recently. I can meet you today, and I don't want to miss it." Hua Qingfeng's expression gradually became calm. He smiled and said, "What's the matter, Marshal Yi?" "Here's the thing." After a brief hesitation, Hua Qingfeng slowly smiled. "I visited South America a few months ago, and I saw that the young lads of the security department are really good. Ever since the minister took charge of the security department, the quality of the security department can be said to be the highest in the past few decades. Just this alone is enough to convince me." "Marshal Yi, you flatter me." Hua Qingfeng shook his head. "The tactics you left when you took charge of the guard department are still the model of the guard department's research. As for the recent ministers of the guard department, you can be called the first." Yi Dongsheng had also served as the minister of the guard department, and he was Hua Qingfeng's predecessor. Yi Dongsheng could sit in the position of deputy minister of the army headquarters, and Hua Qingfeng could sit in the position of minister of the guard department. It was originally a deal between the academics and the Southeast group. Tactics are tactics. Yi Dongsheng shook his head. Without the ability to execute, Everything is in vain. Minister Hua is much better than me. Some time ago, I chatted with Tianzong and talked about the current spirit of the guard department. Tianzong is very concerned about this matter. Minister Hua, you may not know that the internal defense force of Beihai province had some problems some time ago. I personally think that with Minister Hua's ability, it is easy to change these situations. So Tianzong wants to talk to you. I wonder if Minister Hua will do me the honor? Internal Defense Force? Hua Qingfeng glanced at Yi Dongxing in surprise. Yes, one of the most elite troops in Beihai province. Minister Hua, Tianzong wants to transfer you to Beihai to serve as the deputy commander of the Beihai Corps and the commander of the Internal Defense Force. Of course, if you have other requirements, you can also put forward them. In terms of personnel transfer, the Wang family of Beihai will come forward to operate. Yi Dongxing smiled softly. He added calmly, President Li Huaqing is under a lot of pressure. At present, it seems that it is difficult for him to take care of the problem of the special warfare system. Minister, it is time to make a decision in advance. Hua Qingfeng narrowed his eyes. The Beihai Corps was a super-large corps second only to the Border Control Corps, but it was equally elite. In terms of the system of Beihai province, the Beihai Corps was mainly responsible to the Wang family of Beihai, followed by Jianghu state. All the equipment, weapons, logistical supplies, and officer appointments of the Beihai Corps were completely dominated by the Wang family of Beihai. There was no need for high-level meetings. As long as it was reported afterward. The deputy commander of the Beihai Corps, the commander of the Internal Defense Force. This position was no lower than that of the Minister of Security, and even a little higher. Those who sat in this position were all corps members of the Wang family of Beihai. There was no doubt that if Hua Qingfeng agreed, he could also get this treatment. And the shadow sect might have more freedom to develop in Beihai province. Hua Qingfeng's eyes sparkled with the light of thinking. After a long time he smiled and said softly, General Yi, thank His Majesty for my kindness, but I still prefer the Department of Security. The smile on Yi Dongxing's face faded imperceptibly. He didn't seem to expect Hua Qingfeng to refuse. Hua Qingfeng looked at Yi Dongxing's face. His eyes were calm but firm. Goodbye. The academics gave up the right to speak in the special warfare system. The shadow sect would be in an awkward situation, so Hua Qingfeng had to make a new choice. The Wang family of Beihai seemed to be the best choice. But it just seemed so. For a super-wealthy family like the Wang family of Beihai, the most valuable people in the entire shadow sect were probably Hua Qingfeng himself and several Thundershocking Realm experts. Even the experts below the peak of the Thundershocking Realm were not very valuable. As for those fire-flaming realm experts of the shadow sect, most of them were not even qualified to enter the Heaven Punishment Troop. Such a shadow sect was not qualified to be valued by the Wang family of Beihai. A deputy commander of the Beihai Corps and the commander of the Internal Defense Force might be all they had. In contrast, Hua Qingfeng preferred to choose Li Tianlan. Because the shadow sect was not strong enough. Li Tianlan was not strong enough. His cooperation with Li Tianlan was a timely help. Both sides were trying to survive. Such cooperation was the most solid and worth looking forward to. Yi Dongxing looked at Hua Qingfeng's back quietly. He looked a little regretful and took out his mobile phone. The phone was in a call mode. You heard it. Yi Dongxing said helplessly. Yes. It was the voice of Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong on the phone. He refused us. He's very sober. Yi Dongxing said, he's worth it. People who can recognize their own value are the most valuable. Wang Tianzong smiled. Yi Dongxing also smiled. It's a pity that the shadow sect is going to be won over by Li Tianlan. It's not a big problem. Wang Tianzong said, they are far from the power that can control the battle situation. They are not even enough to occupy the left and right parts. Yi Dongxing agreed and suddenly said, I've read that list. There's nothing new. Nothing. It can only be said that we haven't looked carefully enough. Wang Tianzong said softly, Senior Li is good at forbearance and planning. It has been more than 20 years since the Li family collapsed, but unless I'm crazy, I won't believe that he was willing to accept failure. The upheaval in Eastern Europe this time is the key. Before dealing with Li Tianlan and the giant group, it's good if we can dig out some of Senior Li's chess pieces in Jianghu state. Are you sure Senior Li will take action? Yi Dongxing asked. He has to take action. If he doesn't take action at this time, what's the point of planning? Just like Li Tianlan asked me in the Sky Academy, it's hard for me to cultivate a son like Xianxia. At Senior Li's age, he can't cultivate a good enough grandson. He can't cultivate one even if he wants to. Well, Yi Dongsheng hesitated. What's wrong? Wang Tianzong asked. East Island. Yi Dongxing's tone was a little dry. Wang Tianzong was silent for a while and said softly, "Someone is watching." "It's okay." Yi Dongsheng nodded. "Hang up." On the mountainside of Mount Dibing, Wang Tianzong hung up the phone silently and looked at the lake in front of him. The fishing rod extended into the lake in front of him, and there was a wooden barrel in front of him. There was no water in the barrel. There was nothing in it. Summer Solstice, who was in a long dress, weaved a wreath around Wang Tianzong. She put the wreath on Wang Tianzong's head and said with a smile, "Stupid. There's no fish. I'm afraid I can't eat the grilled fish you promised me." "What's the hurry?" Wang Tianzong coughed and said solemnly, "It's too early for lunch." Summer Solstice snorted, sat down beside Wang Tianzong, and leaned on him. Wang Tianzong looked at the lake in front of him with calm eyes. "What are you thinking about?" Summer Solstice touched his chin and asked. "I'm thinking." Wang Tianzong narrowed his eyes. Did Senior Li really not make a move this time? Summer Solstice didn't speak. It could be said that she single-handedly set off the treason case of Jianghu State. At the same time, she smashed the murderous weapon of the Li family, Infinite Sky, and broke Li Guangtu's invincible state with the murderous weapon. But Summer Solstice didn't dislike Li Honghe at all. Wang Tianzong wore a bright and somewhat funny wreath on his head. He held Summer Solstice with one hand and remained silent. Did Li Honghe really not make a move? This was a question he never talked about with Yi Dongsheng. But Yi Dongsheng would definitely think of this. In fact, even if Li Tianlan took control of the Snowdance Corps, there would be no problem. Because he was the unparalleled sword emperor of Jianghu State. At the most critical moment, the strongest sword was enough to destroy everything. If Li Honghe really did not make a move, it could only mean that in today's snow country, even if Li Honghe did not make a move, Li Tianlan had the power to check and balance Wang Tianzong. But how was this possible? You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.